This is MC of our story, Logan McLean, the oldest son of a noble family that's basically broke beyond repair. The maids in the house were absolutely terrified of him, and honestly, they had good reason. Just look at the guy's face. Dude looked straight up demon on Viagra. So, one day, Logan decided to visit his father at the castle, but the soldiers straight up blocked him at the gate. No entry. Their excuse was brutal. They said he wasn't worthy. According to them, he was nothing more than the son of the Baron's former wife. Around the castle, people either feared Logan or straight up hated him, because until that point, he really had been arrogant and completely despicable. But things were about to flip, because Logan wasn't the same person they thought they knew anymore. The guard's attitude irritated him badly. So, Logan reached into his outfit, pulled out a pair of gloves, and tossed them directly into the guard's face. Full public humiliation. A move like that meant only one thing: the insult would be paid for with a duel. Logan didn't stop there either. He insulted the guard, saying the real failure here was him, calling him a lifelong mediocre soldier. Domian completely lost it. Overcome with rage and emotion, he accepted the duel against the prince. They headed straight to the dueling arena, agreeing to use wooden swords. But here's the thing, knights can use aura. Even with a wooden sword, a strong knight could easily kill a weak warrior. Everyone watching genuinely feared for the prince's life. To them, Logan was obviously a total loser. Domian attacked with everything he had, pouring aura into his strike. But Logan dodged with insanely precise timing, slipping past the attack and countering right over Domian's sword. The impact was so strong that it knocked the weapon straight out of the guard's hand. He literally couldn't keep hold of it. The crowd froze in shock. Whispers. How did Logan, the so-called loser, know how to fight like that? Logan wasn't satisfied. He told Domian he could have a second chance if he wanted. But the soldier was still on the ground, staring at his own hand. He couldn't deny it, the blow had been incredibly heavy. Logan didn't wait for an answer. He stepped in and landed more strikes with the wooden sword. Pure payback for what happened earlier. By the end of it, the entire fight left the castle soldiers shaken to their core. Prince Logan wasn't the weakling he used to be. And the reason behind that changed something none of them could possibly know. The truth is, in the future, when Logan was 40 years old, he was nothing more than a common soldier. His noble family had already been completely destroyed by then. The other soldiers constantly mocked him, especially because, back when Logan was younger, he had lost a duel to his own younger brother. They never understood how someone like him even ended up as a soldier after his entire family was wiped out. Back then, the kingdom had been betrayed, and enemy forces invaded. Every soldier fought bravely, and Logan fought too, but none of it mattered. The kingdom still lost, and in the end, they were all eliminated. That day, Logan died on the battlefield. As his life faded, regret crushed him. He regretted countless things, especially how horrible of a person he had been. More than anything, he wanted to ask his father for forgiveness. Then, suddenly, Logan woke up in his room, completely shaken. He had been injured after taking a blow to the head during the duel against his younger brother. The realization hit him hard. The protagonist couldn't believe it. Was everything he experienced just a nightmare? No, definitely not. He remembered everything too clearly. Logan looked out the window and saw his family's castle, the same place he lived in when he was young. Soon after, his younger brother came to visit him in his room, clearly terrified of how Logan might treat him. The boy was trembling with fear, and it made sense. Logan had always been awful to everyone, especially to him. Logan remembered the last time he treated his brother like absolute garbage, and that moment was exactly why Ronanan never tried to get close to him again. Logan's head throbbed as memories flooded in. Ronanan genuinely cared about his brother, but the servants knew Logan's reputation all too well. Rick, the butler, told the young Master Ronanan to leave the room, but for the first time ever, Logan didn't scream. Instead, he spoke gently and told Ronanan to come closer. The boy froze in shock. So did the butler, Rick, thinking young Master Logan was acting strangely today. Logan wanted to praise Ronanan's strength, but the words wouldn't come out. He knew words alone weren't enough after treating him like trash for so long. Then Logan hugged his brother for the very first time. He asked for forgiveness for everything he had done. He admitted that he had been a terrible brother, and that Rome was truly amazing. No one in the room could hold back their tears at that moment. After talking for a while, Ronanan finally left Logan alone. The protagonist looked out the window again, and knew for sure this wasn't a dream. He had gone back in time, and this time, he was going to do things differently. This time, he would save his family. A maid accidentally walked into the room and immediately apologized. Rick rushed in after her and apologized too on her behalf, explaining that Mary hadn't done it on purpose. The whole situation was irritating. Logan suddenly realized how ridiculous it was that everyone acted this terrified of him, thinking, just how miserable had he been back then? Logan told them it was nothing, and asked them to bring him some paper and pens. Rick and Mary instantly panicked, wondering if the young master was actually going to work now. When they brought what he asked for, Logan thanked them. Rick was stunned to hear that his master really just said, "Thank you." Now the servants felt like they were dreaming. Once again, Logan realized what a piece of trash he used to be. He asked to be left alone so he could work, but before starting, he remembered something important. The war against the Empire would happen in 10 years. That war would be what destroyed his family, because they would be weak and drowning in debt. His goal now was clear. He wasn't just going to change who he used to be, he was going to change his family's fate. On top of that, an internal war in his region, set to happen just 1 year from now, was the very first event that began shattering his territory's reputation. After working for a while and filling pages non-stop, Logan finally decided it was time to go see his father. As he walked through the estate, he noticed the staff turning their faces away from him, avoiding eye contact like it was instinct. They genuinely believed Logan could end their lives on a whim, and that fear was burned into them. Along the way, a maid carrying freshly cleaned clothes didn't notice him approaching and tripped, crashing to the ground. The girl froze completely. In her mind, this was it. Her life was over. But that wasn't what happened. Logan reached out with a gentle hand and helped her back up. For a moment, it felt like some kind of miracle. Then the girl looked at his face. That terrifying face she recognized all too well. Logan wasn't known for kindness. She immediately begged for her life and ran away without daring to look back. Watching her flee, Logan realized something important. Simply acting different wasn't going to fix things overnight. After all, he'd spent years smiling like a damn murderer. When Logan reached his father's office and announced himself, his expression turned cold again. It had been more than 20 years since he'd last seen his father. As expected, the atmosphere inside was icy. The patriarch of House Mclain, Patrick Mclain, had no reason to show respect to his eldest son. Logan explained why he was there. He asked for permission to undergo isolated training on the family's mountain property. The protagonist still carried the memories of his past life and already knew how night training worked, but his current body was useless, lazy, and completely untrained. On top of that, he needed money to change his family's situation, and becoming stronger would help with that too. He had to be ready, because in 3 months, that girl would arrive. Patrick immediately questioned him, asking if Logan was trying to run away after losing to Ronian. Logan denied it. He admitted that he was weak and that he had wasted his life until now. He wanted to get better. But Patrick had heard these words before. He refused the request, saying Logan's problem wasn't just a lack of effort. Logan had expected that answer. Logan admitted that his behavior had been his biggest flaw, and said he was determined to change it. His father didn't believe him anymore, and ordered him to leave. The request was denied. This was the consequence of everything Logan had done. Still, Logan didn't back down. He told his father that he had been foolish and immature until now, and that this training would be his first step toward real change. Even the most bitter father couldn't completely abandon his child. Patrick finally relented and said this would be Logan's last chance. Before letting him go, he asked if Logan really thought 3 months was enough to catch up to Ronian. Logan answered firmly that the training wasn't about defeating Ronian. It was about defeating himself. When Logan left the room, Patrick felt something he hadn't felt toward his son in a very long time. It's respect. And Logan noticed it. Even though his father said nothing out loud, Logan knew that changing himself was worth it. Logan went to the mountains and stayed there for 3 full months. His goal wasn't just to train his body, but to reach something greater. True warriors could defeat even dragons by using the life force stored within their cores. Day after day, Logan trained himself to absolute exhaustion. By the end of those 3 months, he managed to form his core, something he had only accomplished at 40 years old in his previous life. With it, he could push his body beyond its breaking point. On the final day of training, Logan stood before a massive tree and prepared his strongest move. He focused all his aura, channeling it into his sword and muscles. The strike was powerful enough to slice through space itself before cutting the target clean in half. This was the power he had gained at the end of his previous life, and now he could use it at this young age. Even so, the strain on his weak body was enormous. This was a technique meant only as a last resort. Now it was time to go home and start making real changes. The first change was obvious: his clothes. He smelled like a sewer. When Logan returned home and went to show his progress to his father, the guard Domian stopped him at the entrance, saying, only those with direct Mclain blood were allowed to pass without authorization. That was the moment Logan realized his authority within the family was slipping away. Right then and there, Logan challenged Domian to a duel. He shocked every guard in the castle by effortlessly defeating a trained soldier. This was the result of his training and combat experience, and it ensured no other guards would try the same stunt. Later, inside his father's office, Logan and Patrick spoke again. Patrick admitted that what he had seen was impressive, acknowledged Logan's awakening, and asked what had happened during his training. Logan realized his father had been watching, something he never expected. He explained that he had simply abandoned his greed and let everything go. As he trained with that mindset, he eventually felt a force filling him from within. Logan reflected that even if it sounded unbelievable, this insight came from his past life. Only after giving up on avenging his family had he become a force user back then, awakening only after 40. Patrick was impressed that such a simple realization had led to such change, and said Logan had truly transformed. However, he was still furious. After achieving such a breakthrough, the first thing Logan did was attack a knight. Logan argued that the man deserved it and asked whether his father had heard the full story from the soldiers. Patrick said he had, but still believed those measures weren't necessary. They were necessary, Logan insisted, surprising his father. The knight had tried to deceive his lord's blood and make a fool of him. Letting that slide would poison the family's discipline. Logan then reflected on hierarchy, the foundation that keeps any organization functioning. Once hierarchy is shaken, the organization weakens over time, something he had learned during 10 years as a mercenary. When dealing with armed men, order must be established in a single decisive move. What happened that day would serve as a warning to the other knights. Patrick admitted Domian was largely at fault for failing his duty and trying to trick Logan. Still, he felt Logan's actions were risky and said it was better to hold back in the future. Logan was shocked by how easily his father forgave him, especially compared to his previous life. Seeing Logan's expression, Patrick even joked and asked if he wanted a punishment. Logan replied that he was good. Patrick ended the conversation by saying he still didn't approve of what Logan had done and warned him never to act like that again without permission, especially since he hadn't officially received his rank yet. Logan respectfully said he would remember that. Soon after that, Logan's father announced that his fiancée, Rena, would be visiting soon. At first glance, Logan looked surprised by the news, but it wasn't surprise at all. It was pure excitement. The day to get the cash was finally approaching. Right on cue, Princess Rena Wolves was formally introduced. Every lady present fell silent, completely stunned by her beauty, and every guard instantly felt jealous of Logan. When Rena stepped forward, she greeted Lord McLean gracefully, saying it had been far too long and politely asking about his well-being. Patrick McLean, momentarily stunned by her appearance, commented on how she had grown into a beautiful woman since the last time he saw her. Rick watched from a distance as well, clearly impressed by how much she had matured, but then he glanced at Master Logan, who didn't look impressed in the slightest. Rena then said she had a letter entrusted to her by her father, the Count, and began reading it aloud. The letter was addressed to Baron Patrick McLean, and it was painfully boring. Over the next 30 minutes, even the guards struggled to stay awake, but the ending snapped everyone back to reality. The final request stated that due to unavoidable circumstances, the arranged marriage between Rena and Logan was to be cancelled. After hearing the letter, Logan quickly understood the message behind it. The Wolves clan had expected Patrick McLean to become a powerful aura user, but instead he had remained a high-ranking knight for over 20 years. And to make matters worse, Logan himself was considered a complete loser. Joining the Wolf clan with the McLeans simply made no sense anymore, so they chose to go their separate ways. Patrick was furious. Breaking off the marriage for such vague reasons was nothing but an insult. He understood immediately that the Wolves were trying to humiliate House McLean. Rena denied that, saying she had personally asked to be the messenger because she feared Patrick would misunderstand their intentions. She wanted to clear things up face to face. She spoke about her vivid memories of spending a year at the McLean residence as a child. She recalled the peaceful days, the beautiful surroundings, and the good moments she shared with Logan. Those memories meant a lot to her, and she didn't want to let them go. But she was bound to her family's will and had no choice but to obey her superiors. The only thing she could do was come in person and apologize to Logan and Patrick. Everyone was moved, murmuring that her heart was as beautiful as her face. Everyone except Logan, his stepmother Mary, and Daddy Patrick. Mary bluntly asked Rena what the real reason behind the breakup was. She demanded to know what these so-called unavoidable circumstances actually were. Logan thought about his stepmother, Ronian's biological mother, and how she had always treated him as an enemy because of the succession issue. He hadn't expected her to interfere, but family honor was clearly a different matter. Rena apologized again and avoided the question, claiming she didn't know the real reason. She explained that since she was only meant to marry into another family, her father never discussed important matters with her. Mary grew furious and concluded that this explained why Rena had come to announce the breakup without any clear justification. Rena, visibly terrified, her white dress now stained with her makeup melted by sweat, looked up at the McLeans and announced that to compensate for the inconvenience, the Wolf clan was willing to pay 3 million gold pieces. McLean's financial manager, Dwayne Filsner, nearly had a heart attack on the spot. Logan, on the other hand, was thrilled. He thought the money was finally his, but no chance. Patrick nearly exploded with rage, demanding to know how she dared to propose something like that. A knight from the Wolf House immediately stepped in front of Rena, protecting her, and begged Patrick to calm down. Patrick asked whether he was a high-ranking knight like himself, admitting that it was impressive for someone so young to reach that level. He continued, saying that perhaps injuring the rising star of the Wolves family would be fair compensation for the dishonor inflicted on the McLeans. The knight replied that his master, Kyron Wolves, regarded Lord McLean as an honorable man and would never target the young princess or anyone younger. Rena then spoke up, saying she also did not wish to buy honor with money. She asked them to accept the gold as a sincere gesture to preserve the friendship between the two families. Patrick clenched his teeth. If he pushed further, he would lose his own honor. He realized this was exactly why Karen had sent these young people. Patrick stated that a visitor was still a visitor, even if they brought bad luck, and that House McLean would never harm its guests. However, he firmly refused the Wolves clan's one-sided offer. House McLean asked for only one thing. Princess Rena Wolf was to personally and sincerely apologize to Logan. Patrick made it clear that he would accept no other compensation. At that moment, Logan stepped in. As the person directly involved, he said he had a request. Internally, Logan knew they needed to accept the money. Letting them off with words alone was insane. 3 million gold was the entire annual budget of House McLean. Half of their current funds came from his stepmother's family, and if that support vanished, they would go bankrupt instantly. And for what? Honor. To Logan, it felt like everyone had lost their minds. Logan told his father he wanted to accept the Wolves' terms. Patrick became furious again, asking if Logan intended to make him go back on his word. Logan thought about the pressure his father carried. Even without aura, Patrick was still a high-ranking knight, but that meant nothing compared to others in the kingdom. If he couldn't handle this, he would never move forward. Patrick insisted House McLean wasn't poor enough to sell its honor for money. Logan sighed deeply and replied that they were exactly that poor. He explained that House McLean already owed the bank 3 million gold pieces. The annual interest alone was 150,000 gold. Without Kiros's money, they would have gone bankrupt long ago. They were the kingdom's biggest family of beggars. On top of that, they owed over 2 million gold to the kingdom they served. Settling this matter with just an apology would only spread rumors that they had bowed to the Wolves. Rena tried to intervene, claiming the Wolves clan wasn't irrational and respected House McLean's honor. Logan immediately asked whether she truly found it rational to unilaterally break off the engagement. A memory from Logan's past life surfaced. Back then, he had believed Rena was genuinely saddened by their separation, but that belief shattered after one incident. He remembered being alone with her in a bedroom. Rena thanked him for coming and said that even if things ended that day, she wanted to create one last memory together. Logan, believing his life as a noble was over, asked her to run away with him that night. That was when she threw a knife at his face, forcing him to draw his sword to defend himself. Rena tore her own clothes and accused him of thinking someone like him deserved her. She mocked him, told him to learn his place, and asked why he even carried a sword after losing to a child. Outside, a thunderstorm raged as she screamed, accusing Logan of trying to assault her. With his sword already drawn, the lie was easy to believe. Logan remembered how he had already been blamed for countless things, to the point where not even his family trusted him. In the end, House McLean had been forced to apologize to the Wolves and pay heavy compensation. Because of Rena, Logan had never been able to trust women again. He thought of her as a street bitch and vowed that this time she wouldn't get away with it. After recalling all this, Logan reconsidered his plan. He had intended to slowly rebuild his reputation by showing everyone he had changed, but the fight with Damien made him realize something crucial. Soldiers ignored disrespect toward him, and rumors about his loss to his brother had spread while he was gone. You couldn't transform the family by winning over people like them. With only 9 months left until the regional war, reputation no longer mattered. Saving his family did. Logan swallowed his pride and told Rena he would accept the Wolves clan's compensation, even if it meant defying his own family. Rena was speechless. Patrick exploded with anger, demanding to know how Logan dared oppose his will. Logan replied calmly that he wasn't satisfied with empty apologies, leaving his father stunned. Words carried away by the wind had no value, and honor built on them was just as light. Rena tried to salvage the situation, saying the Wolf clan wished to obey the Baron's decision, and asked Patrick what he chose. Logan saw through her act, realizing she was trying to protect her father's reputation and was likely terrified of paying 3 million gold. Patrick looked down at Rena and declared that as the head of House McLean, he would accept only a sincere apology. However, he would leave it to Logan to decide whether the apology was sincere. Mary was furious. Patrick warned Logan to think carefully, reminding him that accepting money for dishonor would open the door for honor to be traded again in the future. Logan didn't hesitate. As the one directly involved in the broken engagement, he accepted the compensation offered by the Wolves clan. The decision shocked Mary and visibly upset Rena. Patrick, disappointed, said he thought Logan had improved, but instead he had changed for the worse. He blamed himself for failing to teach him the true value of honor. Logan said nothing out loud, but in his mind, he knew everything he was doing was for the sake of his family. Back in his room, after receiving the handsome compensation from Rena Wolves, Logan was interrupted by a knock on the door. Assuming it was Rick, he casually told whoever it was to come in. Instead, Dwayne, the family's financial advisor, stepped inside. Seeing him there immediately made Logan wonder what this man was plotting. Inside Dwayne's mind, a long train of thoughts unfolded. As House McLean's financial advisor, he had been forced to manage the entire estate with a budget that kept shrinking year after year. On one side were soldiers constantly demanding better weapons, and on the other were servants struggling to secure enough supplies to survive the winter. To fill the financial gaps, Dwayne spent most of his days begging the patriarchs for funds. At times, he genuinely questioned whether he was a financial advisor or just the king of beggars. He often thought that if this wasn't his hometown, he would have resigned long ago. But now, things were finally different. With the 3 million gold, he could finally breathe easy for at least a few years. The only obstacle he saw standing in his way was that idiot. In his mind, Logan would surely have to split the 3 million with him. Dwayne put on a polite smile and told Logan he had only come by to greet him after the impressive showing he made the day before. The way Logan defended himself and refused to yield to unfair external pressure proved he was an incredible apprentice, worthy of becoming the heir of House McLean. As Dwayne praised him, he imagined his flattery had deeply touched Logan. After all, the boy had never been praised before, having only ever caused trouble. Taking his money should be easy, but Logan wasn't impressed in the slightest. Dwayne continued, saying that in times like these, 3 million gold was like rain falling in the middle of a desert. Logan's clever handling of the situation had allowed the family to breathe again. Logan remained completely stone-faced and replied that he didn't see why the family would feel relieved, since the money belonged to him. Hearing that, Dwayne felt all hope drain out of him. He believed Logan intended to keep every coin for himself, but he forced himself to stay calm. After 20 years as the McLean family's financial advisor, swallowing his pride had become second nature. This situation was no different. Suddenly, he began to cry. That reaction caught Logan off guard. He asked if the family's situation was really that bad. Dwayne explained that Logan might not know this, but House McLean already owed 3 million gold to Cooper Bank. He tried to continue, saying the interest alone amounted to 150,000 gold per year, but Logan interrupted him and finished the sentence himself. Dwayne stared at him in shock and asked if he already knew. Logan replied that the interest shouldn't be a problem. After all, it was harvest season, and the income from the harvest should cover it. Dwayne desperately tried to explain that simply running the barony cost an enormous amount of money, and that the family was always operating on an extremely tight budget. He suggested that even a little help could change things, but Logan cut him off again, making it clear he didn't want to hear it. Confused, Dwayne asked why Logan wouldn't help, especially since he had opposed the Baron earlier for the sake of the family. Logan agreed with him. He said he would use the money for the family's benefit, but not to cover the Baron's immediate expenses. Instead, he needed to prepare for the future. Dwayne grew furious inside, thinking Logan had no idea what he was talking about and should just hand over the money immediately. Logan then calmly asked whether paying off the family's debts would truly change anything. Dwayne argued that a larger budget would make managing the estate easier for at least a few years. Logan pressed further, asking what would happen after that. Even if things improved temporarily, they would eventually fall back into debt, because House McLean had no special products to sell. It was a vicious cycle, and Logan intended to break it with a plan of his own. For that plan, he needed the money. Dwayne was completely stunned. He wondered if this was really the same young master he knew. He had always thought Logan was a careless kid who had no interest in family affairs. Logan then said he had a favor to ask. If Dwayne helped him, Logan might even share a portion of the money to help cover some family expenses. Dwayne immediately asked what he needed. Logan answered simply, he needed to gather mercenaries. Later, Logan spoke with Rick. It looked like he was preparing to leave again, and Rick immediately demanded to know where the hell he was going. It hadn't even been long since Logan returned from his isolated training. Logan replied that he was leaving to make money. Rick pointed out that Logan already had a substantial amount, but Logan insisted it wasn't enough. He explained that the patriarch would never allow him to leave now, especially with the tension inside the castle, but Logan had no intention of asking for permission. He planned to slip out quietly. Rick was shocked, but Logan didn't care. He knew that if he couldn't change his reputation now, it would never change. That meant gathering power from outside the family. Luckily, he knew exactly what was happening beyond the estate. Just like in his past life, when he had been kicked out of the family, he already knew his first step was to find a certain individual. Rick tried to reason with him, saying he wasn't thinking straight, and that becoming a fugitive at this point would only make things worse. Logan grew irritated by Rick's persistence. Rick asked what Logan planned to do if he simply ran away, and even said that if Logan really intended to leave, he might as well trample all over him first. Logan was already close to doing just that, given how little Rick seemed to care. Logan reassured him, saying everything would be fine. He would leave a letter for his father, so that no one would blame Rick. Rick asked what he planned to write, but Logan only smiled in response. Rick finally let out a sigh of relief. After Logan disappeared, Rick delivered the letter to the patriarch, who looked like he was ready to turn D-Day into a child's game. The letter began with a long, formal greeting, and explained that, heartbroken over the broken engagement, I had decided to leave for some fresh air but would return soon. Signed by Logan McLean. After that, Rick could only cry, praying for the young master's safe return. A history of the Mlan family is then laid out, revealing that just 200 years ago, the family didn't hold the position it does today. Back then, their territory stretched into neighboring counties, and they were respected as the rulers of the southwest region of the Kingdom of Grandia. However, by the time of the current lord, Patrick Mlan, the incompetence of the last 3 generations had dragged the family down. Their title was downgraded, and their territory shrank dramatically. The massive grain depot, once known as the Mlan Plains, was handed over to a powerful vassal, and the fertile lands were split apart and distributed elsewhere. The place the Mlanes were left with felt like exile. Dry, barren land near the southern mountains, as if they had been kicked out entirely. From that moment on, financial hardship became inevitable. There were no notable regional products, and unlike other mountainous territories, there were no copper mines either. Logan reflected that even if they somehow won the upcoming regional war, they would still have to keep begging Kyros for support. To break this endless cycle, he needed a massive amount of money, far more than the 3 million gold he currently had. He knew there was someone who could help him do that. As Logan entered Cairo, the largest commercial city in the Kingdom of Grandia, voices filled the air from every direction. Merchants shouted out offers for rings, shields, fresh fruits, and vegetables. Walking through the city made Logan realize just how remote and miserable the Mlan barony truly was. According to his memories, the man he was looking for had spent his youth in Cairo, and rumor said he still lived nearby. That man was known as the Golden Beetle, Philip Claude. He was a key figure in the Ares Empire, the strongest nation on the continent. The empire was a centralized power built on merit, meaning talent alone could elevate someone, regardless of age or gender. Even foreigners could rise to power and wealth there. Philip Claude was the perfect example. Born in Grandia, he became one of the richest merchants in the empire and the largest arms dealer on the continent. To many, he was branded a traitor to the Kingdom of Grandia. In reality, however, despite being called the Golden Beetle, Philip had quietly supported people from his homeland and used his wealth to help create the miracle of Grandia's sovereignty. As Logan walked through the streets, he noticed a young man standing in the middle of the road and wondered if that could be him. The boy had just been scammed and was staring blankly ahead, clearly wondering how he would survive without a single coin to his name. Logan had heard rumors that Philip's business collapsed due to a scam, but witnessing it firsthand was far worse than he imagined. As the boy seemed to spiral into despair, even contemplating ending it all, Logan approached and tried to start a conversation, asking if he was Philip Claude. Philip confirmed it, though suspiciously, and asked who Logan was. From Logan's red eyes, steady gaze, and worn armor, Philip assumed the young man was dangerous. Logan said he wanted to talk for a moment, but Philip remained wary, questioning how Logan even knew who he was. At that moment, Philip noticed something in Logan's eyes he had seen countless times before: greed. He quickly theorized that this young man, dressed in old armor and appearing at such timing, must be some mercenary thug. Logan tried to explain himself, but Philip panicked and started yelling that the payment deadline hadn't arrived yet. He shouted that the sale of his commercial property would be finalized in 3 days and told Logan to come back then. Logan assured him he wasn't there to collect any debt. Philip, barking like a rabid dog, kept yelling that none of his sales had gone through yet and ordered Logan to leave. Logan tried again to calm him, saying he wasn't there to collect money, but to invest. That stopped Philip cold. When he asked if Logan was serious, Logan confirmed it. Philip started thinking that if this man wasn't here to collect debts, then he had to be insane for wanting to invest in someone who had completely failed. Still, part of him wondered if Logan might be telling the truth. He asked how much Logan wanted to invest. Logan flipped the question back, asking how much Philip needed and saying he would help him clear his debts and get back on his feet. Philip remained suspicious and carefully studied Logan's expression and the dirt-stained armor. He concluded the young man must have traveled a long distance. When Logan pressed again for an amount, Philip snapped, calling him a disgusting scoundrel. He accused Logan of trying to trick him like everyone else had. He went on to say that he wasn't an investor and that the crest on Logan's armor marked him as a member of the Mlan barony in the southwest. To Philip, the Mlanes were nothing but beggars, living off their rich relatives. How could a family that couldn't even pay its debts afford to invest? He warned Logan that impersonating a noble could get him executed, and complained that Logan had chosen the wrong target, since he was completely broke. Logan analyzed the situation calmly. Even at rock bottom, Philip still showed sharp judgment, exactly what you'd expect from a future tycoon. Logan wondered how to calm him down as Philip ranted in the street about not having money to eat, let alone to die. Then Logan had an idea. He asked Philip to pay attention and released his aura. Philip was left stunned. Someone who awakened force so early wouldn't throw it away on a petty scam. He apologized, admitting that too much had happened recently, and that he was overly sensitive. He asked what Logan really wanted from him. Logan replied that he wanted to hire him permanently and, as a bonus, pay off all his debts. Philip grew suspicious again and asked whether the Mlan family even had that kind of money. Logan asked how much the debt was, estimating around 250,000 gold, and said he would cover it and provide another 300,000 on top of that. He then revealed the cash he'd been carrying. Philip stared at Logan as if he were an angel. He signed the contract immediately. The terms were simple and terrifying. If Philip ever tried to harm his boss intentionally, he would suffer unbearable pain, as if his soul were being ripped apart. The witch who sealed the contract explained that if Philip didn't like the terms, he could awaken his force and become at least a high-ranking knight, hire a four-circle mage, or pay several hundred times the contract's value to break the curse. Philip was left speechless yet again. She dismissed them casually, telling them to come back sometime. Philip wondered if he had just been completely screwed. He realized that a single page of the magic contract was worth 30 slaves, meaning he had just paid a fortune to make Logan his savior. Logan explained that since they barely knew each other, trust didn't exist yet. If he was investing a fortune, he needed a guarantee. Once trust was built, the contract would be removed. He extended his hand. Philip thought the contract was a mess, with no deadlines or conditions, but he had no choice. He shook Logan's hand. When he asked what Logan needed him to do first, Logan replied that they needed to buy monster meat. Philip immediately called him a psychopath. Logan thought the reaction was understandable. Monster blood and flesh were poisonous, and burning them was considered common sense. But in a few years, everything would change. Once word spread that monster blood could be neutralized with common ingredients, food-scarce regions began consuming monsters. That winter, cases of deficiency started disappearing after people consumed Kellogg meat. Even individuals with injuries that caused sterility saw improvement. A year later, the Royal Magic Tower confirmed the findings. The Kellogg monster vanished from the continent as the species was hunted to extinction after it was proven to enhance fertility. With that knowledge, Logan knew he could easily make 3 million gold, maybe far more depending on how much he secured. Walking beside a madman like this, Philip glanced at Logan with disappointment and wondered if it wouldn't be better to just run away. Inside a tavern, Logan and Philip sat down to discuss what their next move should be. Logan casually told Philip that he wanted to purchase monster meat worth 1 million gold coins. Philip nearly lost his mind hearing that and thought Logan had completely gone insane. Logan told him to calm down, confidently assuring him that he would make money even if he spent that much. Philip strongly objected and asked if Logan was absolutely sure about what he was doing. Logan confirmed without hesitation. Philip then asked what the price range per unit was for Kellogg meat. He explained that Kellogg meat was practically worthless at the moment. Most people simply burned it because there were no buyers. If someone at level 0 was sent to retrieve the bodies, it would cost around 200 gold due to kingdom transport fees. That fee was charged per unit. However, if multiple Kellogg's were transported together, the cost would drop significantly. Philip was impressed that Logan had even considered transport fees and admitted that Logan's calculations were correct. He asked if, with that price per unit and a budget of 1 million gold, Logan planned to hire a mercenary guild to conduct a kingdom-wide hunt and buy everything they brought back. Logan confirmed it and asked if Philip saw any issues with that plan. Philip immediately explained that the approach was wrong. Since monster meat was being discarded anyway, Logan should hire a merchant guild instead. Merchants would transport and sell anything as long as there was money involved. Even if it was considered trash, they would gladly bring it. Philip confidently added that once Logan placed the order, they would likely deliver every piece of Kellogg meat in the kingdom, already cut and prepared. Logan was impressed, thinking his investment was already paying off. Half-jokingly and somewhat suspiciously, he called Philip an adorable punk. Philip brushed it off and told Logan not to worry about money anymore. From now on, everything would be handled by him. After all, his own future depended on Logan's success. Logan then handed Philip a list of materials, including ironwood cartridges, springs, and glue, instructing him to buy them in large quantities. Philip once again grew suspicious and asked if Logan was planning to open a toy factory. Logan replied that he had something far better in mind. In reality, Logan was having Philip acquire raw materials for weapons of war. He remembered how weapons made from these exact materials had been used during the invasion of the Kingdom of Grandia in his past life. Depending on the situation, even a single soldier equipped with them could hold back a knight. He also recalled that he had already tasked Dwayne with hiring mercenaries. Simply putting these weapons in their hands would be enough to gain a major advantage in the regional war. However, before that could happen, Logan needed two things: a craftsman capable of producing these weapons, and an instructor skilled enough to train the mercenaries. 2 days later, in Harun, the city of mercenaries, Logan was speaking with Kaisalon, a rank A mercenary, attempting to hire him as an instructor. Kaisalon explained that he had never trained anyone productively before. Logan insisted the job wouldn't be difficult, since he only needed Kaisalon to train rank C mercenaries. Still hesitant, Kaisalon said he didn't know what Logan had heard, but all he had ever done was guide a few young people. He suggested Logan leave the task to professional instructors. Logan internally dismissed the excuse. He knew Kaisalon well from his past life. Kaisalon could wield every existing weapon, had exceptional horsemanship, and more importantly, was an outstanding instructor. The mercenary squad Kaisalon trained after retiring from a serious injury had been stronger than any other. Logan offered 4,000 gold coins. Kaisalon refused. Logan raised it to 6,000. Still no. 7,000. Kaisalon continued refusing, claiming money couldn't buy everything. Logan raised it again to 8,000. That was the breaking point. Kaisalon finally accepted, even thanking Logan in advance. As they talked, Logan revealed that he was the firstborn son of Baron Mlan, and asked if Kaisalon wasn't curious why he was hiring mercenaries from the countryside. Kaisalon replied that he didn't care, as long as he was paid. Walking through the streets, they witnessed a man whipping a group of people, shouting that if they were late again, he would kill them all. Kaisalon explained that Harun was known as the city of mercenaries and slaves, and that scenes like this were common. The city soon turned into a full slave market. Logan replied that he was familiar with this reality and even considered buying a slave himself. A merchant noticed him, assuming he was a clueless country bumpkin, and called him over, boasting about unbeatable prices. The moment the merchant recognized Kaisalon, his face went pale with fear. Seeing that, Logan relaxed, thinking that hiring Kaisalon had already been worth it. They arrived at a shop with far more guards than the others. Logan immediately realized this was the place. An elderly merchant greeted him and said he assumed Logan knew what he was getting into. Logan replied that he was there to buy a dwarf. The merchant confirmed he had come to the right place and explained that races from other worlds were rare, which was why they were treated carefully. He first showed a pair of elves, boasting about how difficult they were to obtain. Logan showed no interest and told him to bring out the chained dwarf in the back. The merchant pointed out that it was clearly a dwarf and added that even among dwarves, famous for craftsmanship, this one had reached an expert level. That surprised Logan. He had always believed dwarves were naturally skilled craftsmen, but an expert was beyond what he expected. Logan asked for the price. The merchant said it would start at 200,000 gold. Logan looked him up and down and asked if he looked like a fool. The merchant nearly wet himself and immediately lowered the price by 50,000. Kaisalon was shocked by how easily Logan forced the price down. The dwarf commented that Logan was ruthless. Logan thought it was just common sense. Logan told the dwarf he was taking him to the Mlan estate in the southwest and that he would do the work assigned to him. The dwarf agreed without resistance. Logan reflected that while dwarves were renowned craftsmen, slave dwarves were different. Without passion, they couldn't create true works. Logan promised that if the dwarf worked sincerely for the next 20 years, he would be sent back to the mountains. 20 years meant nothing to a dwarf. The promise made him happy, and he attempted to thank Logan. At that moment, another slave broke free and tried to escape. He didn't get far before a soldier caught him. Logan immediately recognized the slave. Blue hair, blue eyes, a familiar presence. Logan muttered aloud, catching Kaisalon's attention. He couldn't believe he had found the noble slayer here. Logan remembered his past life. Once a slave, this man escaped after killing his masters and began slaughtering nobles and knights. After disappearing for 10 years, he reappeared as an aura user and devoted his life to killing nobles, earning the title of Noble Slayer. Logan realized the timeline matched. This escape attempt should happen a year after Logan became a mercenary, meaning this man was still a slave. If Logan saved him now, he would gain a future aura user. The problem was that the man was a violent psychopath. Logan decided that if he ever became uncontrollable, he would simply imprison him. As the master raised his whip again, Logan drew his sword and blocked the strike to the man's leg. The slave trader noticed the family crest and immediately grew arrogant, assuming Logan was a customer. He apologized, claiming the slave was misbehaving and needed discipline. Logan said he wanted to buy slaves, pointing to the two children. The merchant warned him that both were rare and expensive, one red-haired, the other blue-eyed. The merchant quoted 10,000 gold each. Logan calculated that a strong slave cost about 300 gold, and scoffed at the absurd markup. He countered with 500 gold per child. The merchant protested, but Logan snapped, asking if he thought Logan didn't know slave prices. The merchant panicked and accepted, blaming Victor for always causing trouble. Kaisalon carried the injured boy on his back, surprised by his fast recovery. Logan casually said it was nothing, though in truth he had been slowly releasing force to heal him. Victor suddenly tried to attack Logan. He didn't even get close. Logan grabbed him by the neck and asked if he was brave or just stupid. He warned Victor to choose his enemies better. Logan promised safety for him and his sister if he obeyed, but threatened to kill them both if it happened again. He released him and said he planned to raise Victor as a knight. Victor asked if he was serious. Logan confirmed it and explained that knights were honorary nobles and could escape slavery. Not just Victor, but his sister as well. Victor swore loyalty instantly. Watching them, Logan realized his assumption was correct. The sister was the key to controlling the noble slayer's violence. Logan stated that their training would begin as soon as they returned home. Logan then asked Hamar the dwarf to step closer for a moment. He told him he would begin drafting a contract, a magical one, and clearly explained its terms. If Hamar worked for him for the next 20 years, Logan would personally send him back to the mountains afterward. Hamar was stunned. He couldn't believe Logan was serious about returning him to his own people. Logan continued calmly, saying that it was hard to trust promises made of nothing but words carried away by the wind. He asked if there was any issue with the contract, or if Hamar didn't want to go through with it. Hamar responded immediately and gratefully. He said he wanted it with all his heart, and would do anything Logan asked of him. He kept thanking him, unable to believe that someone would truly do this for him. Watching his reaction, Logan thought to himself that if all it took to motivate Hamar was a contract, then he was the one gaining the most here. He reflected that this entire venture had already given him everything he wanted and more. Not only had he secured proper preparations for the upcoming clan war, but he had also managed to get his hands on the noble slayer. Everything was progressing smoothly. What he didn't know at that moment was that rumors about his strange behavior had already spread throughout the Mlan estate while he was away. His reputation had completely tanked. Rick, meanwhile, was drowning in confusion, trying desperately to contain the situation, while wondering what the hell the young master was even doing anymore. Soon after, Logan returned home, and no one in the world was happier to see him than Rick. Logan greeted him casually and asked how he had been. Rick nearly lost it, asking whether Logan was serious for even saying that. Barely holding himself together, he demanded to know what Logan had been doing, and whether he had heard the rumors flying around. According to those rumors, Logan had become a perverted monster who spent 150,000 gold on monster meat. Rick explained what had happened. A few days earlier, someone named Philip had gathered every merchant he could find and announced that he wanted to buy monster meat in the name of Logan McLean. Even before that, people had already been gossiping about Logan, about his broken engagement, and how he had practically robbed his fiancée. Philip, unaware of Logan's past, assumed his master was just some eccentric lunatic. Still, he saw opportunity in the chaos. He deliberately spread even more bizarre rumors about monster meat to attract sellers. Then he dropped the purchase price as low as possible while still keeping merchants interested, offering 1 gold piece per kilogram. He knew no merchant would refuse selling trash if someone was willing to pay for it. He even told them to bring every bit of monster meat they could get their hands on. Philip's aggressive sales tactics worked. Merchants began gathering monster meat in large quantities, and rumors about Logan spread across nearly the entire thieves' quarter. Hearing all of this, Logan simply commented that Philip had done his job perfectly. Rick was stunned. He couldn't understand how Logan could laugh at a time like this. Logan told him to look at the expressions of the people who had come back with him, and think about how many rumors they must have heard to be wearing faces like that. To Logan, there was nothing to worry about. He calmly said that everything would be over soon. Rick warned him not to be so relaxed. The next thing waiting for him was a meeting with the patriarch, and he was furious. Inside his father's office, Patrick asked Logan whether he had enjoyed running away from home. Logan answered honestly that the trip had been worth it. Patrick said he had heard plenty of rumors about the strange and reckless things Logan had been doing, but at least it seemed like something had come out of it. Logan defended himself, saying rumors were nothing more than baseless nonsense, and that he didn't regret any of his actions. His stepmother immediately cut in, telling Patrick that she had warned him already. Logan had no awareness of his own standing, and didn't understand how his behavior could disgrace the family. Logan didn't even let her finish. He interrupted her, saying she was exaggerating. All he had done was use the money from the broken engagement in a way he saw fit. Mary pushed again, asking Patrick if he had heard that, and whether he was still going to take Logan's side after everything. That was when Patrick finally snapped. He shouted for her to stop, then calmly but firmly told her to leave the room. He wanted to speak with Logan alone. Once they were alone, Patrick warned Logan that this was the final chance he would give him. Standing in front of his furious father, Logan felt a rare sense of fear. Patrick asked what was really going on in his son's head, and said they needed to talk honestly about everything that had happened. Logan knew his father wouldn't overlook things this time. He replied that even if he explained, Patrick wouldn't understand. Patrick shot back, asking whether Logan was the one who didn't want to be understood. He asked if Logan realized what people were saying about him, that he was violent, cruel, obsessed with money, and even unstable. Patrick asked how much longer he was supposed to keep covering for him, and if the time ever came when he couldn't anymore, he begged Logan to at least warn him. That way, Patrick could tell himself he had done everything possible for the sake of Logan's deceased mother. Logan was stunned. Patrick had never mentioned his mother in his previous life, not even when Logan was cast out. That alone made him think his father hadn't fully given up on him yet. So Logan asked for one more thing. He asked Patrick to give him 1 year. He promised that within that year, he would prove the reasons behind everything he was doing. Once again, he pleaded for one final chance. Later, Patrick was shown alone in his room. replaying the conversation in his mind. He admitted to himself how strange it felt for a father and son to be negotiating favors like strangers. He thought that if Logan failed to prove himself after 1 year, he would have to make a decision, because before being a father, he was the patriarch of House McLean. Patrick looked at a portrait of Logan's mother and apologized to her, saying he didn't understand what was happening to their son. He continued speaking to her image, admitting that he had promised to protect Logan and raise him properly, but in the end, everything had fallen apart because of his own neglect. Walking through the castle corridors, Logan suddenly ran into his younger brother. What he saw made him freeze. Ronian had awakened his force. Ronian commented that Logan guessed it quickly, and added that he had caught up faster than expected. Logan felt genuine happiness, seeing Ronian awaken so early, at only 14 years old. In his past life, Ronian's force had only manifested during the clan war, but this time it had happened far sooner. Ronian told Logan that it was thanks to him. Seeing Logan's confusion, he explained that when Logan returned, the knights tried to stop him from reaching him. In that moment of desperation, his force awakened, and he ended up defeating the knights just to meet Logan. Logan burst out laughing and praised him, telling him he had done well. He thought that once Ronian's force stabilized, teaching him the secrets of the divine sword would make him far stronger than he ever was in the past. Later, in a cabin south of the McLean estate, Logan met with Dwayne. Dwayne informed him that all 35 rank C mercenaries he requested had arrived. The mercenaries were furious. It had been 10 days since they were summoned, and none of them had seen Logan even once. Some muttered that a petty baron's family wouldn't dare provoke a mercenary guild unless they were insane. Others said they might never find out, since the rumors surrounding Logan had already reached them and weren't light at all. They mocked his appearance, saying he wore armor and carried a sword like he was pretending to be a soldier. Hearing all this, Logan realized that if he didn't put these professional scoundrels in their place, he'd never be able to control them. He addressed one of the mercenaries directly and asked if he thought it was funny to wear armor and carry a sword. The man replied that he didn't understand, and asked how Logan had even heard his comment from that distance. Logan mocked him openly, saying that way of thinking only worked if you had the talent to back it up. He called him nothing more than an insignificant C-rank mercenary, and asked what imaginary skills gave him the confidence to look down on others. He sarcastically asked if he had offended him, acknowledging that even low-level men had pride, and told him to step forward if he wanted to settle it. Logan then made a clear offer. If the mercenary could land even a single hit on him, he would be allowed to leave immediately, and would be paid a full year's salary. Logan swore it on his noble honor, and made sure everyone present served as witnesses. The mercenary stepped forward, pleased, saying Logan couldn't take his words back now. He tried to intimidate Logan by sizing him up, but his massive build only drew comments from the crowd. Some wondered if he was already rank B. Others said he might reach it after this job. Logan scoffed, realizing that was exactly where the man's confidence came from. The mercenary told Logan to attack first. Logan replied that he would regret that choice. The mercenary ignored the warning, claiming he had used a sword far longer and didn't need to worry. He even asked if Logan needed any advantages. Logan focused his force and punched him square in the face. The impact stunned everyone. The duel ended instantly, with the mercenary sprawled on the ground and teeth flying through the air. The remaining mercenaries stared in disbelief. Logan simply stretched his shoulder, scoffed, and asked if anyone else felt like running their mouth. They couldn't believe someone his age had already mastered force. It felt absurd. Kaisalon watched quietly, thinking he had always known Logan was different, but never imagined he was this capable. Logan declared that no one would be making comments anymore. He then formally introduced himself as Logan McLean, the one who had summoned them. He explained that many of them were probably wondering why he was spending so much money to hire mercenaries. He told them his plan was to train them into crossbow knights. Dwayne and Kaisalon were both surprised, and the mercenaries didn't know what to make of it. One of them muttered that they would spend most of their time reloading. Kaisalon quietly told Logan that crossbows were inefficient weapons for knights. Logan replied that he already knew that. Confused, Kaisalon asked why he would insist on them anyway. Logan explained that crossbows were far more destructive than bows, but inexperienced users needed over a minute to reload on horseback. Even carrying several loaded crossbows, they would run out of firepower quickly. It was no surprise they were confused. Logan told Kaisalon to train them properly first, even if he thought Logan was just wasting money playing soldier. He assured him the reason would become clear later. As a final statement, Logan said that crossbow cavalry would become a powerful force for House McLean, not just for the upcoming war, but even beyond the conflict with the thieves. Kaisalon still didn't fully understand, but he accepted his master's orders. A few days later, Logan sat alone in his room, staring at a sheet of paper in his hands. Out of the 350 mercenaries they had recruited, only 312 had passed the basic qualification test. After reviewing the numbers, Logan decided it was more than sufficient. Before he could think further, someone interrupted him. It was Hamar, who asked what kind of document Logan had received. Logan explained that it was a schematic for a crossbow he wanted Hamar to build. He added that the design might look crude to a professional craftsman. In his mind, Logan knew this weapon well. He had used it for decades in his previous life, so he drew every structure he could remember. Since Hamar was a master craftsman, Logan believed he could bring it to life. Hamar studied the design and pointed out that the crossbow would need a cartridge mounted at the back to store bolts, reload automatically, and fire 3 shots in succession. He demanded to know who came up with such a ridiculous idea. Logan admitted it was his own, which immediately irritated the dwarf. Still, Hamar admitted the concept itself was brilliant. However, he warned that twisting the string in that structure would cause it to snap, and attaching a wooden box to the back would make it uncomfortable for the shooter. He asked Logan what he planned to do about those issues. Logan casually replied that it wasn't his problem and that Hamar should figure it out himself. That response made the dwarf visibly furious. Logan quickly clarified that he was joking. He agreed that the bolt size needed to be reduced to shrink the cartridge and accepted that it would be a single-shot weapon. Instead, he suggested producing preloaded cartridges that could be swapped after each shot, calling them magazines for simplicity. Hamar was left speechless. He pointed out that even a skilled shooter couldn't fire 2 bolts from a crossbow in under a minute, and that this design felt like a weapon from another era entirely. Logan thought to himself that it was exactly that, a weapon born in the future. Hamar then commented that most people believed building such a weapon only required a spring, some wood, glue, and a bowstring. To him, this was a challenge worth taking on. He said he would attempt it. Logan immediately asked when it would be ready. Hamar shot back, asking whether Logan was seriously placing a deadline on something he had never seen before. Logan responded that it was still a weapon created by humans. Hamar was confused and asked who had made it and where. Logan ignored the question and challenged him instead, saying that if he thought he couldn't do it, he might as well give up. That was enough to trigger Hamar's pride. He declared that he only needed a month and that he would produce something far superior. Watching this unfold, Logan felt satisfied. Messing with a dwarf's ego really did work wonders. Later, on the castle's training grounds, Victor was seen running laps. Logan warned him that he was slowing down again, and that he could push harder. Victor forced himself to accelerate. Logan reflected that for several days after bringing him in, all he had done was feed him properly and let him sleep. The transformation from just that alone was shocking. Eventually, Logan ordered him to rest, and Victor's little sister immediately ran over to him. Once again, Logan thought about what an incredible investment Victor had been. At only 14 years old and smaller than boys his age, Victor had managed to run 20 kilometers without stopping. The talent was obvious. But what impressed Logan even more was his perseverance. The boy seemed unbothered by pain or exhaustion. It became clear to Logan that Victor wasn't born a noble slayer. That path likely emerged because of his sister. Logan cut off his thoughts and told Victor that rest time was over. He tossed him a sword and announced that from that moment on, Victor would begin learning the sword technique of the Kingdom of Grandia, the standard style every aspiring knight was taught. Soon, Logan called for Victor's attention and demonstrated the technique himself. He gripped the sword firmly and sliced through the air with power. Victor looked unimpressed. All he wanted was to collapse and sleep. Still, he clenched his teeth. If exhaustion was the price for good food and a proper bed, he would pay it. He mimicked Logan's movements and cut through the air flawlessly. Watching him, Logan was stunned. Victor's execution matched his own perfectly. Not just the motion, but his breathing as well. And Logan had only demonstrated it once. Seeing how effortlessly Victor followed made Logan admit that even Ronian hadn't been this talented at the same age. Logan told Victor that once he built enough stamina and performed the technique perfectly more than 1,000 times in a row, he could call himself a knight. Victor's eyes lit up at the thought. When Logan asked if he believed he could do it, Victor answered eagerly that he could. Logan added that if Victor needed anything for his training, he could ask Rick, who would probably handle most requests. Victor shook his head and said he didn't need anything. Logan pressed him again, but Victor's only request was that Logan take care of his sister. That alone was enough for him. Logan thought it was the perfect answer. As he continued overseeing Victor's training, Logan acknowledged that the boy wasn't ready for war yet, but in the future, he would become a powerful asset to House Mclane. He also concluded that the mercenary corps and whatever weapon Hamar managed to create would form a terrifying force together. Even so, Logan reminded himself not to get carried away. Hamar might fail to build a proper crossbow, and even if he succeeded, the mercenaries might not know how to use it effectively. Since he had entrusted so much to others, Logan knew he needed to prepare another plan as well. Sometime later, Logan went to his father's office and requested permission to take part in the knight's training. To his surprise, Patrick agreed. That same night, at the training grounds, Captain Hankley formally introduced Logan to the rest of the knights, making it clear that from that point onward, Logan would be training alongside them. The announcement was not well received. Whispers spread immediately through the ranks. Many of the knights believed Logan was treating the knightly order like a joke, especially after defeating Dominan. As the murmurs grew, Hankley recalled a past conversation with the Patriarch. He remembered standing in Patrick's chamber, discussing Logan's entry into the order. Hankly had been strongly against it. He had warned Patrick that the knights would never accept him. Patrick, however, had shut that down quickly. He told Hankly that he wasn't asking for special treatment for his son. In fact, he wanted Logan treated exactly like any other rookie, if not harsher. Back in the present, Hankly thought that despite those words, Logan was still the Lord's son. It would have been much easier if Patrick had asked him to go easy on the boy instead. Logan noticed the captain's unease and reassured him. He said that if he failed even one exercise during the upcoming week, he would quietly step aside and never interfere with Hankly again. The captain was taken aback by that attitude, but eventually agreed. After hearing this, Hankly made a decision. For the next week, the nightly orders training would be pushed to 3 times its usual difficulty. Soon, one of the knights was seen running while carrying another on his back, wondering what kind of insane training this was. Hankly shouted at them not to die, and reminded them that, as cavalry knights, they needed to understand what it felt like to be the horse itself. He told them to feel the burden of carrying armored riders across the battlefield. That was when the knights realized why they had been training in full armor the entire time. Some of them cursed under their breath, blaming everything on that troublesome newcomer. They started betting on how long Logan would last. 1 day, 2 days, maybe 3. They were wrong. Logan was sprinting at full speed, charging through the field, weaving past everyone else. The sight left the knights speechless. Even Captain Hankly was stunned. To make it worse, Logan was smiling the entire time. Hankly grew furious. At this rate, it wasn't Logan who would fall behind, it was the knights themselves. He immediately ordered everyone to stop and announced a 10-minute break. Then he walked over to Logan, asking how he was feeling after that run. What Hankly really expected was an honest admission of exhaustion, an excuse to pull Logan out of the madness. But Logan cut him off before he could finish. He said it was easy. Hankly was dumbfounded and asked what he meant. Logan replied that it was excellent training. If the knights went through this every day, there was no way they wouldn't become strong. He even added that he was looking forward to the next session. Nearby, 2 knights lay on the ground, barely holding on. Hankly realized this was not how he intended things to go. Logan, on the other hand, clearly didn't care. Later that night, Logan looked around the training grounds and realized he was completely alone. Everyone else had already gone home. Standing there, he reflected on why he was doing this. Training with the knights was his insurance plan. If all his other preparations failed, he would still be able to join the knights and fight on the front lines. Building bonds now would only help later. There was another reason as well. Through meditation, he could develop his force. But physical training was just as important, and the knightly order provided exactly that. As he imagined his force core growing stronger and his body feeling no fatigue, Logan drew his sword and unleashed a quick force, slash, clean, and sharp. He marveled at the fact that all this power came from just a 1-star core. When he reached 2 stars, he believed he would be able to rival a high-ranking knight, like his father. The next morning, Logan tested the crossbows Hamar had made and dismissed them all as failures. He bluntly asked Hamar if this was the best he could do. He pointed out that the weapon only fired once and that there was no magazine system in sight. He reminded him that the mechanism needed to be integrated. Hamar exploded in anger. Logan immediately apologized, admitting he had been too harsh. Hamar responded that Logan was right about one thing: no matter their relationship, a craftsman's pride should never be insulted. But what Logan truly meant was that if this was Hamar's limit, then their plans were doomed. That realization nearly made the dwarf lose control. Logan continued pressing, saying that maybe he had overestimated Hamar. Weeks had passed, and nothing satisfactory had been produced. That was when Logan crossed the line. He openly provoked Hamar, saying he had misjudged him, wasted money on him, and been completely wrong to trust him. That was the final trigger. Hamar demanded 1 more month and guaranteed that he would return with something worthy of the investment. In his fury, he smashed the crossbow in his hand before storming off. Logan watched him leave, thinking about how anger would consume him and force him to start over from nothing. A cruel smile crept onto Logan's face as he wondered how far Hamar could go if he was pushed even harder. 1 month later, on one of the training fields, Hamar returned to demonstrate his new creation. The improved crossbow fired 2 bolts at the same time. Logan was left speechless. Hamar explained that although it had 1 fewer shot than originally requested, it was easier to wield with 1 hand and allowed magazines to be swapped quickly. What impressed Logan most was the reload speed: 2 seconds. That alone exceeded his expectations. While the weapon had a shorter range and smaller size than the one from Logan's past life, it was far better suited for mounted combat. For cavalry, it was perfect. Logan couldn't believe how far they had come when there were still months left before the war. When Hamar asked if Logan was even paying attention, Logan suddenly lifted him up like a child, praising him loudly, boasting about dwarves, and wishing long life upon Hamar and his people. Hamar panicked, telling him to put him down before someone saw. He reminded Logan that he wasn't a child. Logan set him down and calmly met his eyes, clearly about to ask something. When Hamar asked what it was, Logan's expression shifted back to something unsettling. He said he needed 400 of these crossbows, and he needed them within 2 months. Logan handed the completed crossbows to Kaisalon and the mercenaries for testing. The moment they fired, everyone was stunned. The bolts traveled an incredible distance, and the weapons could fire consecutive shots without delay. Kaisalan examined one closely, completely baffled. A front-loading crossbow with this kind of range, power, and firing speed made no sense. As the realization sank in, Kaisalan imagined what 300 or more mounted soldiers equipped with these weapons could do. Just thinking about it sent a chill down his spine. He told Logan that what he had created was terrifyingly impressive, and finally understood that this had been Logan's intention from the very beginning. Logan confirmed it. He reflected that Hamar had gone through hell to achieve this. Even with additional craftsmen helping him, Logan never expected Hamar to finish the order 2 months ahead of schedule, let alone produce an extra 100 crossbows. That was the mark of a true expert dwarf. There was no denying it. Logan briefly considered sharing the technology with the knights and regular soldiers, but the cost alone made it unrealistic. Worse, there was the risk of the design leaking. For now, it was better to keep it contained. He instructed Kaisalan to equip the mercenaries with the crossbows and clear out the monsters roaming outside the territory. Kaisalan initially thought the plan was impossible, but Logan remained confident. After some thought, Kaisalan admitted that it might actually work. Logan wasn't satisfied with might. He told Kaisalan to make it work, because if he couldn't, nothing else mattered. Kaisalan finally understood. Logan hadn't built this weapon just to deal with monsters. He was preparing for war. During one of the night training sessions, a knight commented on Logan's insane physical stamina. Another joked about whether that ridiculous endurance was something he inherited. A third added that if Logan was anything like the patriarch, he was probably skilled with a sword. The conversation shifted to Logan's duel with Dominan, until one knight warned the others not to compare him to Patrick. Even before awakening his force, Logan had lost to his younger brother. Still, it was impressive that he had endured this training for over a month. What had originally been designed to make him quit had instead become the new standard for the Knight Order. The training was exhausting, but far more meaningful than pointless drills. It felt like the proper level for real knights. Unexpectedly, it motivated the lower-ranking knights who had previously been slacking off. They also began to truly understand their horses, forming stronger bonds with them. Captain Hankley realized that he had only pushed this training because the young master refused to give up. He never imagined it would produce results like this. It felt as if his good luck had walked straight up to him. That night, alone in his room, Logan reflected on his progress. After exhausting his body through training, he used meditation to stimulate his inner consciousness. The combination was working in perfect sync, and he could feel real improvement. He had already started noticing subtle changes in his force. If this continued, he believed he could surpass even the monsters he had faced in his previous life. Then something unexpected happened. Logan's core expanded. He began muttering nonsense as the transformation completed, and just like that, his core advanced to 2 stars. He realized this meant he now had the foundation required to learn the next secret sword technique, Iron Cut. Murderous Iron Cut. Just remembering the power granted by the first technique made his heart race. The second would be far stronger than he could imagine. If he mastered it before the war, even a high-ranking knight wouldn't intimidate him anymore. The next day, Kaisalan and the mercenaries encountered a group of goblins. The soldiers opened fire, killing them almost instantly. One mercenary noted the lack of recoil, while another observed that his bolt pierced one goblin's head and still embedded itself into another behind it. Logan watched as a swarm of over 100 monsters was wiped out in under 10 seconds. The mercenaries' old habits with basic crossbows had vanished. They were far faster at swapping magazines now. Logan thought the effort of traveling so deep into the territory had been worth it. Kaisalan asked if Logan was satisfied. Logan answered that he was, more or less. He remembered how disastrous their first hunt had been and acknowledged how much they had improved since then. Kaisalan then questioned why Logan had gone to such lengths, saying he had never heard of a mercenary force equipped with this level of firepower. He even asked whether Logan planned to hunt monsters across the entire continent. Before Logan could answer, a mounted knight arrived at full speed, delivering a message from Rick. The day before, Viscount Tesron had officially declared war on House McLean. Inside the McLean war room, Patrick and the other family heads watched through a crystal ball as Viscount Tesron announced his declaration. He claimed that because one of his ancestors had been unjustly killed long ago, he blamed House McLean. Patrick was left speechless. Several nobles exchanged looks, questioning whether such words justified a war at all. Hankley and Marion turned to Patrick, asking what his next move would be. Hankley explained that Tesron's Knight Order alone outnumbered theirs. Even with Patrick on the battlefield, their odds were grim. One noble suggested fortifying the city and waiting for reinforcements. Another proposed sending an emissary to negotiate peace. Patrick exploded. He ordered everyone to shut up. He reminded them that even though the royal family's authority had weakened, declaring war without permission made one thing clear. Tesron had planned this from the start. Peace was impossible. Patrick ordered immediate war preparations and demanded a winning strategy, refusing to tolerate dissent. In the heavy silence that followed, a noble asked whether young Master Logan would also fight. Patrick confirmed it. Marion added that Ronian's force had awakened and that he was old enough to take part as well. Realizing Logan wasn't in the castle, Rick hurried to send a messenger to him. When Logan received the news, he was confused. According to his memories from his past life, the war shouldn't have started for another 2 months. Something had accelerated the timeline. The messenger urged him to hurry, explaining that Viscount Tesseron had already launched an attack immediately after declaring war, breaking all customs. Logan needed to reach the battlefield as soon as possible. Kaisalon and the mercenaries declared they were ready to move at a moment's notice. Logan remarked that Kaisalon didn't seem surprised at all. Kaisalon replied that mercenaries welcomed war. If none existed, they would create one, and now that they had such powerful weapons, it was only natural they wanted to use them. Logan looked at his troops and thought they were dangerously confident. Still, he didn't stop them. Their confidence wasn't unfounded. They had trained relentlessly for months and slaughtered monster hordes with overwhelming force. Logan stated that it didn't matter when the war began. All that mattered was winning. Believing they now had sufficient combat strength, Logan ordered his forces to march toward the Mlan Plains, convinced that this war would end in victory. Back in the barony, the war erupted earlier than anyone expected. Just 1 day after the declaration, Tesseron and his army appeared at the Mlan estate. Their numbers exceeded even the vassals' worst expectations. Captain Hankley reported that Tesseron's army consisted of 100 knights, over 1,000 regular soldiers, and nearly 10,000 conscripts. It was a full-scale war. Patrick thought Tesseron had lost his mind. Not only was he fielding superhuman knights, but he was also throwing conscripts into what should have been a limited domestic feud. Patrick questioned what could drive Viscount Tesseron to such extremes. Then things worsened. Hankley reported that House Kairos had issued a warning stating they would not send reinforcements. Patrick and Mary were left speechless. Mary argued it had to be a mistake, insisting that she and Dwayne had checked everything to prevent this exact outcome. With no other choice, Patrick ordered Hankley to gather every man capable of wielding a weapon. They would respond with full force. Patrick reflected bitterly on how Kairos, whom they trusted completely, had abandoned them at their most desperate moment. House Mlan assembled everything they had: 53 knights, 552 regular soldiers, 4,418 conscripts, a total of 5,023 combatants. Still, it wasn't even half of Tesseron's army. On the battlefield, 2 soldiers whispered to each other. One asked where young Master Logan was. The other answered that Logan had been gone for a long time and still hadn't returned. A few nearby soldiers muttered that he probably wouldn't come back at all, guessing that he must have fled as soon as he heard about the war. Hearing this, Ronian turned sharply and demanded to know what they were talking about. He said there was no way Logan would ever do something like that. Ronian believed Logan had already foreseen this war, and that was exactly why he had taught him that secret technique. There was no chance Logan would run away now. Some of the soldiers nearby overheard Ronian's words, but instead of reassuring them, it only reinforced the rumors spreading through the ranks that the Lord's eldest son had deserted. Soon after, Patrick appeared beside Ronian. He told his youngest son that he would have to take Logan's place on the battlefield and ordered him not to hesitate or waver. Patrick himself didn't want to believe the rumors either, but belief no longer mattered. What mattered now was victory. With that resolve, he commanded all troops to advance and crush the scum daring to attack his home. At that moment, Tesseron appeared with a confident smile, pleased to see Patrick finally draw his sword. He shouted that his knights were his blade and challenged Patrick to face them head-on. Patrick gathered his aura and charged forward, attempting to smash through the enemy vanguard, but his attack was stopped cold when a knight bearing a shield blocked him completely, leaving Patrick momentarily stunned. Rick was also present on the battlefield, and his expression was grim. He watched soldiers being slaughtered and torn apart right in front of him. He realized how badly they were losing. They had been forced to send even non-combatants like him into battle because of the overwhelming numerical disadvantage. If they were fully surrounded, they were finished. In the middle of his thoughts, Rick was suddenly struck on the head by a Tesseron soldier who was about to kill him. He barely managed to dodge as an ally intervened, killing the attacker and shouting at Rick to get up and ready his spear. Rick reached out to thank him, but before he could say a word, an enemy knight cut his savior down, spraying blood across Rick's face. At that moment, Rick understood something clearly. His only chance to survive was to escape as far away from the enemy lines as possible. Mounted soldiers soon charged forward, and Rick stumbled through piles of corpses, both allies and enemies. He realized with horror that they were surrounded from behind as well. This might be where all of them would die. Meanwhile, Patrick continued fighting his opponents. After repelling one attack, the knight he was facing acknowledged Patrick's strength, saying he truly lived up to his reputation. Patrick, however, was uneasy. They had clearly prepared for him, and even so, he wasn't confident in his current condition. He noticed that this knight had endured blows infused with explosive force and was still standing. What shocked Patrick further was realizing that Tesseron possessed a high-ranking knight. Judging by their coordination, the other knights surrounding him were likely at least intermediate level as well. Was that why they showed no fear? Patrick demanded to know if they were the ones assigned to deal with him. The knight answered with a question of his own, asking Patrick what he thought of their preparations. Surrounded by 4 knights, Patrick realized that if he remained trapped there, the situation would spiral out of control as more knights joined in. He raised his sword and charged again, swearing that this would never happen. He clashed blades with the high-ranking knight, only to be attacked from behind by another enemy wielding a spear. He narrowly avoided the fatal strike. Seeing that they were attacking from all sides, Patrick shouted in fury, asking whether they had any honor as knights, and cursing them for fighting like cowards. The enemies clearly didn't care. One of them even remarked that this would be his last battle before death, so Patrick should stop complaining. Patrick attacked again with everything he had, colliding swords with one of his enemies. This time, luck abandoned him. A spear pierced into his back, tearing through his stomach and leaving him gravely wounded. He realized the truth then. While the high-ranking knight kept him occupied, the others struck whenever they pleased. It was a perfect trap. There was no escape. As the enemy closed in, Patrick bitterly thought that Logan had made the right choice by fleeing. At the very least, he hoped Logan would survive and carry on the Mlan legacy. From a distance, Tesron watched the battle unfold with satisfaction. He congratulated himself on keeping his high-ranking knight hidden until now. Once Patrick fell, taking Mlan Castle would be easy. Just as he prepared to issue his next command, he heard something unexpected behind him. The sound of cavalry. A servant rushed over, reporting that a mounted unit was approaching from the rear. Around 300 riders, possibly more. Tesron paused, wondering if the Mlanes had hidden troops he didn't know about. The servant hesitated, then added that something was strange. The approaching cavalry wasn't carrying lances. Their only weapons were small crossbows. Tesron burst out laughing. He mocked the report, asking if those were the tiny crossbows hunters used. He ordered the rear guard and archers to wipe them out immediately, dismissing them as nothing more than fifth-rate soldiers. Before he could finish speaking, a bolt tore straight through the servant's head. Tesron froze inside his armor. Logan had entered the battlefield, and he was furious. He gave the order to fire. Instantly, a storm of bolts rained down on Tesron's forces. The mercenaries' projectiles punched through armor, shields, and flesh alike. Hundreds fell in mere seconds. One soldier realized that anyone who failed to raise a shield in time was already dead, and that he himself would have joined them if he had reacted a moment later. Tesron's archers scrambled to return fire, but their arrows fell harmlessly short. Their bows couldn't reach Logan's troops. Another volley followed, cutting down even more of Tesron's soldiers. Watching the rear collapse in seconds, Tesron couldn't understand what was happening. There was no magic involved, just those cursed crossbows. Questioning, what kind of weapon had the Mlanes created? Enraged, Tesron screamed at his knights to turn back and destroy those bastards. The cavalry charged at full speed toward Logan's forces. Logan watched them coming with a smile. At the same time, another fight was unfolding nearby. Ronian was locked in combat with an enemy knight. He narrowly dodged an incoming strike, and his opponent mockingly praised him for reacting well. As weapons clashed around them, one soldier shouted to his comrade to stop playing around with the kid, reminding him that the battle had already turned deadly. The other replied that he wasn't holding back at all, adding that even though Ronian was young, he couldn't be underestimated. Hearing their exchange, something finally clicked for Ronian. This wasn't training anymore. This was real war. Compared to this chaos, he realized he wasn't some prodigy, just a boy who had awakened his force early. Even so, losing wasn't an option. Too much depended on him. He thought of his father, who had entrusted him with doing Logan's part in this war as well. He couldn't afford to hesitate here. As his thoughts raced, an opening suddenly appeared. Ronian noticed one of the enemy soldiers had turned his back, completely exposed. He had no idea why the man was doing something so careless, but Ronian knew this chance wouldn't come twice. Without hesitation, he swung his sword in a decisive arc, slicing straight through the soldier's body. It was over so easily that even Ronian was shocked. Then he noticed something embedded in the fallen enemy's chest, a bolt. Looking up, his face lit up with joy as he saw Logan in the distance, shouting his name at the top of his lungs. But that moment of relief was brief. More enemy knights were charging furiously from behind Ronian's position, rushing toward Logan under the Viscount's command. Logan watched their movement and immediately recognized the kite shield formation they had adopted. It was a strong defensive tactic, but it wouldn't be enough. This was where his real plan came into play. Logan calmly ordered his mercenaries to aim their crossbows diagonally toward the ground. The command confused them once again. Then Logan flashed that unsettling psychotic smile and gave the real order: fire at the horses. He wasn't holding back anymore. Dirty tricks were fair game if it meant winning. The mercenaries reacted instantly, grinning with the same bloodthirsty excitement as Logan. A hail of bolts tore into the cavalry's mounts. Horses screamed and collapsed, throwing riders violently to the ground and shattering the charge in seconds. Logan felt relief knowing he had arrived in time to support Ronian. But the battle wasn't over. His father was still in danger. Remembering his vow to save his family in this life, Logan knew that victory meant nothing if Patrick fell. He issued a quick command to Kaisalon and immediately rushed toward his father. Kaisalon panicked. This wasn't part of the plan. Victory was already within reach, and Logan was risking everything by charging ahead alone. Even if Logan was stronger, running into a mid-ranking knight could turn the tide. Still, Kaisalon pulled himself together and ordered Gerald to provide covering fire. As Logan cut through the enemy lines, Patrick was still locked in a brutal duel with the high-ranking knight, and the situation looked grim. The knight mocked him, saying he couldn't believe Patrick would recklessly charge forward knowing he'd be impaled. At the last second, Patrick twisted away and leapt back, barely creating enough space to breathe. As he observed the enemy's movements, something felt off. They were fighting with desperation, pushing themselves beyond reason, practically throwing their lives away. That didn't make sense. They had the advantage. Why were they acting like cornered animals? Before he could think further, Patrick deflected 2 incoming lances in quick succession. Then, out of nowhere, Logan appeared in front of him. In the blink of an eye, Logan cut down 2 mid-level knights, leaving Patrick completely stunned. Patrick remembered seeing Logan enter the battlefield with a mercenary force far behind enemy lines. There was no way he should have reached this spot so quickly. As Patrick turned his head, the sight behind him froze his thoughts entirely. The ground was littered with corpses, an ocean of bodies stretching across the field. Patrick wanted to ask how Logan had become this strong, but now wasn't the time. Nothing made sense anyway. Instead, he asked the only question that mattered: did Logan's arrival mean they were winning? Logan simply nodded. Hearing that, Patrick placed a hand on his son's shoulder and told him he had done well. The high-ranking knight stared at Logan in disbelief. A 20-year-old boy from a remote barony had just taken down 2 mid-level knights effortlessly. At that age, the knight himself had been destroying his body just to qualify as a knight. None of that mattered now. He resolved to kill Logan on the spot. He barked orders at his fallen comrades, telling them to regroup. Patrick, watching this, realized something critical. Logan was strong enough to handle most mid-level knights. If Logan took care of them while he focused on the high-ranking knight, they might still win this battle. But Logan had other plans. He stepped in front of Patrick and extended his arm, declaring that he would face the high-ranking knight alone. Patrick immediately objected, warning him it was too dangerous. He acknowledged Logan's growth, but reminded him this enemy was high rank. Patrick didn't finish his sentence. Logan punched him hard in the stomach, knocking him flat onto the ground. Logan bluntly stated that in his current condition, even he could defeat his father. He told Patrick to trust him and leave this fight to him. Reluctantly, Patrick agreed. He warned Logan to be careful. Logan replied that they didn't have time, they needed to finish this quickly. The high-ranking knight was furious. How dare a brat like this advance on him? He surged forward, pouring his strength into his strike. Their swords collided, and with a single blow, Logan sent the knight skidding back several meters, leaving him stunned. The knight couldn't understand it. Despite Logan's injuries, he sensed no overwhelming aura or superior level, and yet, he was being overpowered. There was only one explanation. Logan was pushing himself beyond his limits. The knight attacked again, with killing intent. They exchanged blows at blinding speed, leaping back and forth, blades clashing. As their swords locked once more, the knight thought that if he weren't injured, he would already have won. That was when Logan saw it, a fleeting opening. He struck instantly, slicing his opponent and inflicting a deep wound. Logan leapt back just in time to avoid the counterattack. As the knight analyzed the exchange, he realized there were no obvious gaps. Logan needed to force one. Then he noticed something, and Logan noticed it too. The knight was absorbing the force behind Logan's strikes. Thinking he had sprung his trap, the knight declared that Logan had fallen right into it and prepared to finish him. Logan appeared off balance. The killing blow was about to land, but it never did. Logan regained his footing instantly, leaving the knight questioning whether his own movements had slowed. Logan's aura surged as he prepared his sacred technique. The knight felt it immediately and knew he had to retreat. Too late. Logan unleashed a devastating wave of cutting energy. The attack erased the high-ranking knight in a single strike. The battlefield fell silent. Logan roared that he, Logan Mlan, had slain the enemy general of Tesseron's army. Panic spread through Tesseron's ranks. Soldiers stared in disbelief. A high-ranking knight had fallen. With the Viscount's banner nowhere in sight, morale collapsed. Weapons clattered to the ground as soldiers begged to surrender. Rick began chanting Logan's name, praying for his master's safety. One by one, the voices joined him, until the battlefield echoed with it. The Viscount was already fleeing the battlefield, his mind spiraling as he tried to understand where everything had gone wrong. 3 full years of preparation had amounted to nothing. He had sought support from other nobles, gathered 100 knights, and yet everything collapsed because of that damned red-haired boy and his strange weapons. Thinking quickly, Tesseron decided that survival came first. If he could just make it back to his own territory, he might escape with his life. When he reached his castle, he shouted for the guards to open the gates. The soldiers were stunned to see him return so suddenly. Before the gates could fully open, another guard spotted movement in the distance and shouted a warning. Knights were approaching, and Logan was leading them. Tesseron froze in place at the sight. Logan dismounted calmly and remarked that the Viscount had been pretty quick to run. Then, standing directly before the gates of Tesseron's territory, Logan raised his voice so everyone could hear and declared that Tesseron had already lost the war. He ordered the garrison to open the gates and welcome the true victor. From atop the walls, the soldiers hesitated. Some wondered if it was true, if that was why their lord had rushed back in such a panic. Before doubt could spread further, a general barked at them, demanding to know whether they planned to cower just because the enemy spoke boldly. The men snapped back to attention. The general pointed out that there were only a little over 300 enemies outside. As Logan charged his aura again, the general insisted that such a small force could never take the castle in a siege. The soldiers guarding the gate were confused about what Logan was doing until he leapt over the wall, soaring dozens of meters into the air. Landing inside, he calmly told the general to open the gates unless everyone there wanted to die. Otherwise, he would kill them himself and open the gates personally. Inside the palace, Tesseron was frantically stuffing gold coins and valuables into bags, thinking that at the very least, he should escape with some wealth. Suddenly, Logan's voice rang out behind him, announcing that he had finally caught up. Tesseron stumbled backward in terror and demanded to know how Logan had gotten inside. Logan replied coldly that Tesseron's own servants had betrayed him before he even needed to draw his sword, which spoke volumes about the Viscount's reputation as a ruler. Furious, Tesseron cursed his servants for their betrayal. Then fear overtook him again. He dropped to a pleading tone, declaring his surrender and promising reparations according to feudal conventions. He begged Logan to spare his life and the lives of his family. Logan scoffed and asked him what right he had to speak of conventions. He looked down at Tesseron and reminded him that he had declared war without warning and invaded everything in a single day. Logan's fury was unmistakable, a vein bulging on his forehead as he questioned whether Tesseron had any conscience at all. Tesseron tried one last appeal, arguing that noble honor and feudal law guaranteed the safety of prisoners. Logan agreed on one condition. He said he would uphold the honor and customs of his own house, House Mlan. Therefore, Tesseron's life would be spared, and he would be allowed to take a limited amount of wealth and leave. Tesseron was about to thank him when Logan interrupted. He said that if Patrick had been standing there, he truly would have done all of that. Patrick was an honorable man, one who might even accept unconditional surrender. As Logan spoke, he noticed a diamond-studded dagger resting inside a chest. He picked it up, admiring its craftsmanship. Tesseron quickly insisted Logan keep it, saying it was made by the finest craftsman in the kingdom. Logan refused, and told Tesseron to take it with him. Then, without warning, Logan drove the dagger straight into Tesseron's chest. As Tesseron collapsed, he accused Logan of lying, shouting that he had promised to spare his life. Logan replied calmly that he never made such a promise, he had only described what his father would have done. Unfortunately for Tesseron, Logan was nothing like him. Tesseron tried to mutter something about noble honor, but Logan cut him off, asking if he had any idea how many people had died because of his greed. He ordered him to end his filthy life right there. Tesseron fell dead to the floor. Looking down at the corpse, Logan thought that Tesseron should be grateful for such a quick death. He clenched his fist, still stained with blood, and exhaled slowly. The crisis was finally over. All that remained were the finishing touches. He loudly announced that Viscount Raymond Tesseron had taken his own life. That would be enough. Moments later, Kaiselan entered and informed Logan that he should inspect the castle's underground prison. A few days later, outside the walls of Tesseron's castle, Logan stood with his father. Patrick explained that he had come as soon as he recovered from his injuries. He asked about Tesseron's suicide. Logan confirmed it, remarking that Tesseron must have been driven to despair. Patrick wasn't convinced. He stepped closer and bluntly asked whether Logan had killed Tesseron himself. The two locked eyes in a tense stare, as if a fight might break out. Logan finally admitted the truth. Yes, he had eliminated Tesseron deliberately. He explained that sometimes they needed to take matters into their own hands, and that leaving Tesseron's bloodline alive would only invite future disasters. Patrick studied his son for a long moment. Then he praised him, saying Logan was a grown man now and must have had his reasons. He added that no matter what anyone said, Logan was the key figure in this war, and thanked him sincerely. Hearing this filled Logan with happiness. He looked at his father and smiled wide and genuine. Patrick, blushing and fumbling his words, told him he had done a good job. Then he shared even more news. Logan would be officially named the heir of House Mlan. Logan smiled again, then shook his head and refused. Patrick was stunned and demanded to know why. Was Logan worried about his reputation? Patrick assured him that his achievements in the war were more than enough to silence all criticism. But that wasn't the reason. Logan explained that Ronian was far more suitable to inherit the family. The Mlanes were a family of knights, and Ronian had awakened his force at only 14, 4 years earlier than Logan himself. There was no telling how strong he would become as an adult. Patrick was left speechless. He argued that strength alone didn't decide who should lead a noble house. Logan agreed that under normal beliefs, that was true. But if Ronian earned the title of the continent's youngest force user, as he had in Logan's previous life, there would be no objections at all. More importantly, Logan had no personal interest in becoming Baron. He didn't want to waste time tied to that role. As the older brother, Logan said he wanted to give Ronian the chance he deserved. He asked Patrick to delay choosing a successor until Ronian came of age. Patrick admitted he never imagined Logan cared so deeply for his brother, but agreed to his request. The decision would be postponed for 5 years, until Ronian became an adult. Logan thanked his father. Still, Patrick insisted on granting him another reward. They would return to the mansion to calculate the spoils of war, which would likely reach several 100,000 gold pieces. But judging by Logan's expression, he already had something else in mind. Suddenly, a guard shouted for the gates to be opened. The Mlan knights had returned. The townspeople immediately gathered, murmuring in disbelief. They couldn't believe the army had come back in barely a week and that the war had supposedly ended in just a single day. 2 men began discussing it, one of them wondering aloud how such a thing was even possible. He asked if the Mlan knights had always been this powerful. The other man lowered his voice and asked if he had heard the rumors that everything happened because of the young master, Logan Mlan. He said that according to the soldiers who had returned first, Logan's mercenary troops completely reversed the battle. They appeared behind the enemy as if they had predicted everything in advance. Another man added that the enemies had been wiped out by some strange new weapon, and that Logan himself had even defeated a high-ranking knight. A young woman asked if the young master had always been such an extraordinary person. Someone else replied that he always thought Logan was just fooling around before. Slowly, the crowd began to piece things together. Maybe the monster meat he had bought earlier wasn't meaningless after all. Maybe the boy had always been preparing something far bigger. Some even whispered that Logan might have been acting the whole time. The thought sent chills through them. They began praising him, saying geniuses truly lived on a different level, especially now that he had awakened as a Force user. Logan heard every word and felt painfully embarrassed listening to people talk about him like that. Ronian asked how it felt to receive so much admiration. Logan replied awkwardly that it only made him blush, and told his brother not to exaggerate. But Ronian insisted it wasn't exaggeration at all. Everything they said was true, and told him he should at least smile for the people who were so happy to see him alive. After thinking for a moment, Logan decided to try. He forced out what he thought was a heroic smile. In reality, it looked more like someone desperately holding in a bowel movement while sprinting toward the castle. Honestly, he resembled either a rich lunatic, like Rich McGee, or Medusa herself. The moment the crowd saw Logan smile, everyone froze. They were convinced he was about to crush their skulls with his bare hands. Logan, completely unaware of what he had done wrong, stood there confused. Ronian could only feel pity for his poor brother. Patrick turned his head to look at Logan, genuine pride written across his face. Then he raised his voice and announced that the next round of cheers would be dedicated to the true champion of the war, and declared that the grand reception had officially begun. Soon after, the scene shifted to the castle gardens. Logan wandered through the courtyard, amazed that a welcome ceremony could continue all the way until dawn, especially for people who had just returned from a battlefield. Unfortunately, the peaceful moment didn't last long. From behind him, Marion suddenly shouted his name and demanded to know what he thought he was doing. Ronian quickly grabbed her arm, trying to calm her down, but Marion ignored him. She said she had heard everything. She demanded to know whether it was true that Logan had refused the position of successor and asked what he was really planning. She accused him of fooling everyone else, but warned that she was not stupid. Ronian tried to defuse the situation, explaining that Kyros's betrayal had deeply shaken Marion. Logan told him it was fine. Turning toward Marion, he reflected that despite the resentment she still carried, she had lost all real influence after Kyros abandoned her. She was no longer a serious threat. Logan thought that if he handled this carefully now, there might still be a chance to make things right. He admitted sincerely that his behavior over the past months had been unreliable and shameful. He confessed that even he regretted what he had done, driven by jealousy and feelings of inferiority. Hearing this, Marion shouted at Ronian that she had been right all along, that Logan himself was admitting everything had been his scheme. Ronian cut her off again, begging her to stop. He apologized to Logan once more and explained that she wasn't thinking clearly. Logan barely reacted to Marion at all. Instead, he turned to Ronian and told him to listen carefully. The person who truly deserved an apology wasn't Marion, it was Ronian. Ronian was startled and asked what he meant. Logan explained that ever since returning, he had been apologizing without really saying what for. The regrets and cowardice he had carried for years weren't easy to face. Ronian demanded to know what exactly he was talking about. Logan finally confessed the truth. He said that for years, he had secretly despised Ronian. He admitted that he had tried to hide his own weakness by resenting his younger brother. Those pitiful years filled him with shame. Now, he truly regretted them. He bowed deeply and asked Ronian to forgive him sincerely. Ronian stared at him in silence. Logan, still bowing, thought bitterly that good deeds never erased past sins and that he had been foolish to hope otherwise. Then Ronian finally spoke. He said it was okay. Logan froze in shock. Ronian continued, explaining that he believed if he treated Logan kindly, even when Logan was cold one day, the brother he remembered would come back. Then he smiled at him. It was the kind of smile that could make even a grown man cry. Logan felt warmth flood his chest. He wondered why he had hesitated for so many years to do something so simple. Turning to Marion again, Logan told her sincerely that he truly cared about Ronian and genuinely hoped his brother would become the successor. He admitted that asking for her trust right away was unreasonable, so instead he asked her to watch him closely. From now on, everything he did would be for the sake of the family. As Marion walked away, Logan thought quietly that for now this apology would have to be enough. The very next day, deep inside a forest, Logan and Hamar were walking side by side. Hamar grumbled, asking where in the world they were headed right after returning from war. Logan calmly replied that he had rested enough already, and that it was time to start working again. Hamar muttered under his breath that he was only nervous because of the task ahead, thinking about how he would finally enjoy the rewards this time. Logan assured him confidently that this job would definitely be enjoyable. Hamar hesitated, convinced that Logan had absolutely no idea what he was talking about. Soon, they stopped in an open clearing and stared into the distance. Hamar suddenly froze in shock. It turned out that Logan planned to open a mine there. Earlier, during the discussion about the barony of Tesron, Patrick had explained what Logan wanted as his reward from the war. Instead of land, titles, or wealth, Logan had requested permission to explore the hill near the Tesron border. Patrick had laughed and said calling it a hill was generous. It was practically a barren wasteland with nothing valuable in sight. He asked why Logan insisted on that specific location. Logan only smirked and replied that there might be gold hidden beneath the ground. The truth behind Tesron's sudden war only came out a year later. It turned out Tesron had secretly been exporting gold from a hill located in former Mlan territory that he had seized. That single gold mine alone had elevated Tesron far beyond the status of an ordinary count's family. That prosperity lasted until Ronian later wiped out the entire family in revenge. Back in the underground prison of the Tesron barony, Kaisalon had mentioned that there were several strange prisoners worth inspecting. One of them claimed he had committed no crime. He said he had only accepted a request from the Count to transport gold from the mine they were hired to work in. Despite that, the Viscount had imprisoned them anyway. Logan pressed a hand to his face, stunned by Tesron's stupidity. He couldn't believe the man had locked up 5 highly valuable mining specialists. One of the prisoners asked nervously if Logan was angry on their behalf. In reality, Logan's merchant instincts had awakened. He realized he had just stumbled upon an enormous and unexpected business opportunity. The old prisoner studied Logan suspiciously, wondering what kind of person he was. In Logan's thoughts, however, the recent war with Tesron felt like nothing more than surviving a small wave. The true disaster was still ahead. In 1 year, King Samuel Grandia would suddenly die. That single event would spark a brutal struggle between the 3 princes, plunging the kingdom into a 3-year civil war. During that time, the kingdom's military strength would be severely weakened, and before it could recover, the Empire's invasion would begin in full force. That chain of events would ultimately destroy the kingdom. Since the Mlan family belonged to no political faction, remaining neutral would only turn them into powerless bystanders. But Logan saw a chance hidden in that chaos, and he refused to let it slip away. He planned to use the instability to reclaim the kingdom's old territories and restore his family as rulers of the Southwest. And if possible, he even intended to end the civil war itself, and something even greater. Just as he was about to continue that thought, Hamar interrupted him, asking what he was spacing out about after calling him over. Logan snapped back to reality, realizing he had drifted too far into the future. They had only just survived one crisis. For now, he needed to focus on building power as fast as possible. But dreams like that would sound insane to anyone else. No matter what happened, he had to fund everything with his own money. That barren hill would become the golden goose that financed all his ambitions. Logan informed his servants that there was gold buried inside the hill, and that he intended to dig and establish a mine. He asked them for an estimated cost. The servants were stunned into silence. Hamar thought it was just another one of Logan's insane ideas. The old supervisor said Tesron had paid them generously, so he agreed to the inspection immediately. But opening a gold mine felt excessive. He cautiously asked Logan if he was truly certain there was gold there. Logan nodded and said he had seen it with his own eyes. The old man asked how that was even possible. Logan replied that it had been part of a secret operation, and for safety reasons, only the 6 people present would participate in the drilling. Hearing that, the old man grew uneasy, suspecting Logan might be planning to dispose of them afterward. He argued that 6 people could never handle such work and accused Logan of exaggerating. He almost said that even with a dwarf involved, it would be impossible, but stopped himself and silently prayed that Hamar could somehow manage it. Hamar locked eyes with Logan and calmly said that he should prepare to die, sleep less, and give up any hope of a normal life if he accepted this task. Seeing that expression, the old man felt his soul leave his body. Logan, however, was satisfied. As expected of Hamar, he truly had the mindset of a lifelong craftsman. Logan said that now both Hamar and the old man were officially ready to begin, and once again asked for the financial estimate. The old man explained that they first needed to drill test shafts to estimate the size of the gold deposit, but the initial investment alone would require 5 million gold pieces. Hamar added that safely developing the mine would take a long time. Just the preparation phase would need 6 months, followed by another 6 months for full extraction. Logan nodded. It was exactly as he had expected, huge costs and long delays. But this mine had made Tesron wealthier than most Count families. He had no choice but to seize this opportunity. He thought that if he could already sell the monster meat, he would have enough funds by now. But its effects wouldn't be recognized for another 6 months. Then, a realization struck him. Maybe he didn't need to wait. If he could neutralize the poison in the monster meat, he could sell it immediately as medicine. After all, he had detoxified countless poisons during his years as a mercenary. Creating an antidote should be possible. If he perfected the formula and sold it, he would become unimaginably rich. A week later, in the southwest McLean village, Rick brought Logan the medicine he had prepared, using crushed night herb, web herbs, and drip grass. Logan immediately told him not to call it fake medicine, explaining that it was simply a neutralizing agent. Then he asked where the monster meat was stored. Rick replied that it had been placed in the village warehouse exactly as Logan requested. Hearing this, Logan said that was perfect and announced they would apply the medicine directly to the meat. Rick panicked instantly and asked if he truly had to go with him. Logan confirmed that of course he did, but Rick looked far from thrilled and warned that he had never been there before and had no idea what kind of horror awaited them inside. Logan grew annoyed, wondering why Rick had suddenly become so dramatic. Then it hit him, the stench. The moment they approached the warehouse, the smell assaulted them so violently that even a sewer would have seemed fragrant by comparison. Logan admitted he expected it to smell terrible, but this was bad enough to make him vomit. Rick had already started throwing up on the spot. Luckily, Logan quickly found a solution. He used his aura to block his sense of smell completely. After sealing it off, he calmly prepared to enter and told Rick it was time to begin. Rick stared in disbelief, watching Logan walk in perfectly fine while he himself was still on the verge of collapsing. When he asked how Logan could endure it, Logan replied that he had temporarily paralyzed his sense of smell using force. Rick muttered that it was unfair, and Logan shot back that if it bothered him so much, he should awaken force himself and solve the problem properly. Logan handed Rick a pouch of white powder, the neutralizer, and instructed him to sprinkle it evenly over the meat. He explained that he should apply enough for the outer layer to turn white, while the remaining black portions were still poisonous and needed to be handled carefully. After that, Rick had to chop everything finely and roll the mixture into small pellets. When a sample was finished, Logan asked if it looked like proper medicine. Rick confirmed that it did. Logan then explained that they would sell it as medication, and since Rick would be responsible for preparing everything, he needed to pay close attention and remember every step. Rick protested immediately, saying there was no way he would do something like that. Logan casually replied that he would pay 100 gold coins for every pill produced. Rick changed his mind instantly. Logan, however, felt irritated, thinking he could have forced him to do it for free. Next, Logan said they needed to test the effectiveness of the product. Rick asked what kind of medicine it was supposed to be. Logan replied that it was good for men, but Rick still didn't understand. Logan sighed and told him he would only explain once, so he had better listen carefully. He described 2 rabbits, a male and a female. The male rabbit was weak and depressed because he couldn't properly move his little foot inside the pot. The female rabbit then gave him a special tea to cheer him up. After drinking it, the male rabbit turned into a super rabbit, his little foot becoming 4 times bigger than before, allowing him to stir the pot far more effectively. After finishing the story, Logan asked Rick if he understood. Rick nodded immediately, saying he got it and that he already had the perfect test subject in mind. Logan became curious and asked who it would be. Rick replied without hesitation that it was Mr. Dwayne. Soon after, Dwayne knocked on Logan's office door and heard a calm, "Come in." He apologized for disturbing him and said he had heard Logan wanted to see him, but after stepping inside, Dwayne couldn't find Logan anywhere. Suddenly, Logan appeared behind him like a vampire emerging from the shadows and scared him half to death. Dwayne leaped back like a professional basketball player, clutching his chest and nearly collapsing from shock. He scolded Logan for sneaking up on people like that. Logan casually approached him and said he simply wanted to massage his shoulders, since he had been working so hard managing things after the war. Dwayne insisted he was fine, and said Lord McLean was the one truly suffering. Logan mentioned that his father had even fainted from exhaustion, but Dwayne snapped back that it only happened because Logan scared him earlier. Logan told him he understood how hard things had been. They had spent every last coin on the war. The servants and knights didn't even know it, yet they kept pestering him for money, driving the administration insane. He said he must have misunderstood Logan all this time, and never expected him to care so much about the administrators, but he didn't finish the sentence. Logan cut him off abruptly, and asked if that stress was the reason for his problems in bed. Dwayne froze. He turned pale as stone and lunged toward the door, trying to escape. Logan calmly told him to at least hear him out, and placed the medicine in his hand. He explained that it was a patented product from Philip Cale's merchantry, with guaranteed results after just one pill, silently admitting to himself that he had never actually tested it personally. Dwayne hesitated, stared at the pill, then reluctantly swallowed it. Sometime later, Dwayne was seen sprinting through the castle corridors at full speed, shouting Logan and Rick's names. The two turned around as Rick heard the frantic voice, while Logan already knew exactly what was happening. Dwayne had come back for more. Rick tried to scold him for running in the halls, but Dwayne ignored everything and immediately asked Logan how much he wanted for the pills. The poor man looked ready to kill for them. Seeing this, Logan flashed a predatory smile and declared the medicine a complete success. Rick grumbled angrily about being ignored again, while Logan told Dwayne to hold out his hand. Panting heavily, sweating, and barely able to stand, Dwayne dropped to his knees in front of Logan. It looked less like a transaction and more like a marriage proposal. Logan stood there as if about to accept, while Rick stared in total disbelief. Logan handed Dwayne a wooden box filled with pills. Dwayne received it as though it were a sacred treasure. It turned out that after the first successful test, men began bowing before him, and the experiments continued several more times afterward. Sometime later in an office, Logan was talking to Hankley, casually mentioning that he had heard rumors about Hankley and his wife fighting every single night. Hankley immediately denied it, demanding to know who would dare spread such nonsense. But before he could say anything else, Logan told him to shut up and shoved a pill straight into his mouth. Hankley had just become Logan's second test subject. He swallowed it, and the effects kicked in almost instantly. He turned toward the door as if to say something, but Logan cut him off again, telling him to go see his wife right now and that he would deal with everything with his father. Hearing that, Hankley broke into a grateful smile, thanked him, and bolted out of the room like a force of nature, clearly heading toward what could only be described as a legendary night. Later, Patrick was shown sitting in his office. He had become the third experimental subject, and judging by his expression, he was also more than satisfied with the results. Looking in the direction of his father's room, Logan thought to himself that he almost felt bad for Ronian. At this rate, his brother might be getting another little sibling soon, meaning he wouldn't be the youngest anymore. Watching all this chaos unfold, Rick finally snapped and angrily asked Logan why he never let him test the pill too. After all, he was the one who had worked the hardest on everything. Logan stared at him blankly, glanced down at Rick's lower half, turned his back, and started walking away. Rick shouted after him, asking what the hell that weird look was supposed to mean. Logan stopped without turning around, and replied that Rick wouldn't even get the chance to use the pill anyway, so giving it to him would just be a waste. He even told him not to follow because he stank. At this point, it was painfully obvious Logan was enjoying torturing the poor guy. Later on, Logan was seen speaking with Philip through a magic orb. Philip admitted that if the medicine really worked as well as Logan claimed, the demand would be massive. He asked how much Logan planned to charge for it. Logan replied that it would be 100 gold per pill and 10,000 gold for a box of 10. Philip hesitated at the price and asked if Logan seriously thought the nobles in the capital were idiots, warning that he could get into serious trouble charging that much. Logan confidently replied that they weren't fools at all. In his past life, the medicine had been such a huge success that its price had skyrocketed. He insisted that if Philip only released a limited quantity at first, the product would sell for even higher prices. Philip listened carefully, admitted it made sense, and paid for another 10 minutes of communication time. Logan continued, saying that the medicine would explode in popularity if a famous person tried it and gave a testimonial, someone well-known who actually needed that kind of medicine. Philip was speechless and argued that no noble would ever publicly admit that his impotence had been cured by a pill. Logan replied that they didn't need anyone to officially announce anything. So many people were constantly watching the nobles that even a quiet rumor would spread like wildfire, and everyone would come running like bees to honey. Hearing that, Philip suddenly got an idea and suggested that Logan should go to the capital's party. Logan exploded and asked if Philip had lost his mind. Only parties he had ever attended were drunken mercenary celebrations after wars, and his family didn't even have money for proper noble parties. Philip insisted that parties were perfect for making connections, even for business. He admitted it would take time and that Logan obviously couldn't sell the medicine directly at the party, but the idea sparked something in Logan's mind. Philip quickly asked if Logan was really thinking of doing something that reckless, warning that his family would be shunned by high society. Logan replied that nothing like that would happen if he didn't actually sell anything there. He then told Philip about a great informant in the capital and asked him to find the guy and gather all the information he would need. Philip hesitated, asking what informant he was talking about and what crazy plan he was cooking up this time. Logan simply said that he would be heading to Gran soon and would explain everything once he arrived. Hearing that gave Philip a very bad feeling. A week later, Logan arrived in Gran, the capital city of the Kingdom of Grandia. Philip stared at him in disbelief that he had actually come and asked how he managed to get his family's permission. A noble's son traveling to the capital to sell aphrodisiacs was not something you saw every day. Logan assured him that he hadn't told his family the truth, although bringing 3,000 boxes without a single servant was proving to be a real problem. He thought to himself that his father had let him go much more easily than expected, probably because of everything he had accomplished during the war. Philip remarked that, now that he thought about it, Logan hadn't had a servant the first time they met either. He asked if it was really okay for a noble to walk around like that. Logan replied that servants only slowed you down, not to mention they already had their own jobs to handle. He thought about Rick and the massive task he had entrusted to him. He continued thinking that even though he treated Rick harshly, sometimes in both his past and current life, Rick had always done everything for him, and he was genuinely grateful. A mental image of Rick appeared in his thoughts, specifically the moment Rick stole a bunch of pills from him. Annoyed, Logan had warned him that if he shook him and any pills fell out, Rick would get punched once for each pill. That was what he called tough love. Then, Logan suddenly announced that he had made up his mind after getting a brilliant idea. To celebrate all his hard work, he declared that he would name the medicine emporic. The best way to honor a man's legacy, after all, was to name an impotence pill after him. Philip didn't even question it. At this point, he had no doubts left. Logan was absolutely a lunatic. Inside the dorm room, Philip told Logan that he must be exhausted from the long journey and suggested that it would be great if he could recover at a bar. Logan immediately replied that Philip should watch his mouth when talking about someone who couldn't get it up in a place with so many people listening. Philip agreed, saying the environment here was much better for discussing sensitive matters like that. He then mentioned that he had already met with the informant and asked if Logan was really sure about paying 900 gold per document. Logan admitted the guy was ridiculously expensive, but also extremely competent. He explained that as long as the request was precise, they would get flawless information. Philip reassured him that he had followed the instructions exactly. The first document listed nobles who had been married in the last 10 years, but still had no children. The second contained names of nobles with no lovers or secondary wives. And the third listed nobles who frequently sought out food, meant to boost energy. Hearing this, Logan said everything Philip mentioned was perfect, and that they were good to go. He praised him for doing an excellent job, not only on this task, but on everything he had asked Philip to handle in the capital. Philip replied that it wasn't that hard, and added that the real crisis had been the day he heard about the war. He told Logan he couldn't even imagine how worried he had been. When he heard that the war had ended that same night, Logan, who had been staring at a piece of paper, felt glad knowing Philip actually cared about his clients. That feeling didn't last long though, because Philip soon complained that just thinking about the mountain of monster meat he would have to deal with made him lose his appetite. After all, who in their right mind would buy that garbage? Logan immediately threw a piece of paper straight at Philip's face, telling him to shut up and read it. As the paper smacked into him, Philip wondered why it hurt so much. He started reading, while Logan asked him which name on the list he thought would make a good first client. A tear rolled down Philip's right eye as he suddenly noticed something. Seeing that reaction, Logan watched him closely, waiting for him to speak. Philip pointed at a name on the sheet and asked Logan what he thought about that particular person. Logan glanced at the name, and his expression instantly changed to pure shock. He recognized it. Later on, inside a grand ballroom lit by a massive chandelier, people were sipping champagne. A very large man stood out among the crowd, wearing a red jacket and black dress pants, while chatting with a group of beautiful women. That man was Count Davis, and his name was suddenly shouted by Logan to get his attention. The Count turned around in disbelief, his face twisting into an expression of disgust mixed with fear. Logan walked up and introduced himself, stating his name, Logan McLean, and his title as the eldest son of House McLean. Count Davis forced himself to stay composed and barely held back a laugh as he greeted his new guest and welcomed him to the party. He looked Logan up and down, found his clothes tacky, and wondered what kind of farm he had crawled out of, assuming that must be the fashion in the Southwest. Logan thought about how he was wearing the clothes Philip had recommended and, just as expected, nobody liked them. He concluded that meant they were actually a perfect choice. He wasn't here to make useless friends at a meaningless party. His only target was Count Davis, the fallen one. Despite being an important figure in the Grandia Kingdom's treasury, and having married at 20, he still had no children to this day. Logan had been shocked when Philip pointed him out on the list, because in his past life, Davis had become quite famous, not for a good reason, but for being the Count who killed himself because of his wife. A memory flashed of an old argument where Count Davis's wife screamed at him during a party, calling him an impotent bastard in front of everyone. That single humiliation had driven him to take his own life. Logan thought about how reputation and public perception were everything, and that Davis fit all three conditions he had given the informant. He was the perfect first client for Emporic. Logan addressed the Count, saying he had come to the capital on a business trip and had heard about his prestige, so he wanted to greet him personally. The Count asked what kind of business Logan could possibly be running in a city that already had everything. He added that since Logan was from the outskirts, he must be carrying some fascinating rural product that didn't exist in the capital. Logan replied that he was certain the product he was selling wasn't available there, which was exactly why he had come. He said it was a specialized medicine for men. Leaning close to Davis's ear, he quietly revealed the word stimulant. Hearing that, the Count froze, bit his lip for a moment, and then suddenly shouted for everyone to hear how a nobleman's son could dare to sell stimulants. Two nearby girls watched the scene, cringing from embarrassment. The Count thought that some country bumpkin like Logan had a lot of nerve acting important in the capital, and he assumed he had put him in his place based on the look on his face. Logan let out a deep sigh and prepared to say something else. He told Davis that, as a sign of courtesy, he had brought a gift for the influential people of the capital and kindly asked him to accept it. He handed a small box to the man and said it was emporic, explaining that each pill would normally sell for 100 gold coins. He added that he had brought these 3, especially for the Count as a gift, and guaranteed it was a great medicine with no side effects, putting his honor as a noble on the line. Davis listened to everything and started sweating. A few days later, Logan's doorbell rang. It was a servant of Count Davis, sent to buy more emporic. The servant greeted him, confirmed he was indeed the Count's attendant, and later left with a leather briefcase, with Philip right behind him, thanking him for the purchase and inviting him to come again. Philip returned to the room and counted the money for Logan. They had made 10,000 gold from 10 boxes, and Philip commented that it wasn't bad for their first sale. Logan, however, didn't look pleased at all. He said they needed to do much more than that, because the rent for that tiny shop alone cost 10,000 gold. Philip replied that this was to be expected since they were in the center of the capital, and Logan had no idea how much trouble he went through just to rent the place. He added that strategically, having a store was necessary because seeing people gather with their own eyes had a much greater psychological impact. Logan agreed and announced that he was heading out to another party. Philip groaned, complaining that he had been dragged to parties almost every single day since arriving in Gran, and sometimes he even had to attend 2 in one day. Logan explained that having Count Davis as the first client wasn't enough. He needed to promote the store to as many people on that list as possible. A week later, Count Davis's servant was walking down the street, still unable to believe the Count had asked him to buy that medicine again, especially after seeing that no health foods had ever worked for him in the past. When he reached the shop, he was completely stunned. A massive line of men stretched down the block, all waiting to buy the medicine. He observed the crowd and wondered what was going on until it suddenly hit him. He recognized every single one of them. One was Viscount Talon's chamberlain, and the man in front of him was Count Hamel's butler. He adjusted his hat to hide as much of his face as possible, thinking this would generate unnecessary gossip. He decided he'd better just buy the medicine and leave. As soon as he did, Philip stepped out of the store to address the crowd. He apologized and announced that unfortunately, the stock prepared for today was already sold out. Hearing that, the servants waiting to buy medicine for their masters were horrified. One of them went up to Philip and asked what he meant by sold out, since no one had said anything earlier. Philip apologized again and explained that emporic was insanely popular, but production couldn't keep up, so sales were limited to 50 boxes per day. Two guys grew tense immediately and started begging Philip to sell them some, saying their masters wouldn't be forgiving if they returned empty-handed. While all this was happening, another noble passed by with his servant and noticed the commotion. He sent his servant to check what was going on. From behind a corner of a nearby building, Logan watched everything with satisfaction. He thought that by limiting the supply, customers would feel even more desperate to buy, and seeing the crowd would spark the curiosity of other nobles. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had planned. Philip shouted for everyone to hear that the day's stock was gone and told them to come back tomorrow. The next day, he sold out again. The same thing happened on the third day, leaving the nobles wondering how many days in a row this madness would continue. Logan commented that it was incredible, saying daily sales had been booming for over a month now, and today they had sold out the moment they opened. He added that, at this rate, making 4.5 million gold in a single month might not be so impossible after all. Hearing this, Logan sarcastically asked who would have guessed the capital had so many impotent nobles. He said they had tripled the price since mid-year, yet people were still willing to pay even more, which made him worry about the kingdom's future. After saying that, he stared at Philip with a serious look. Then, all of a sudden, he broke into a maniacal grin like someone who had just found his next victim and started laughing loudly. His voice echoed out of the shop, making people on the street turn their heads. In the end, he was just ridiculously happy. He grabbed Philip by the neck and started messing up his hair, calling him an admirable brat and praising him for doing a great job. Philip, meanwhile, was turning purple from lack of air. He bowed deeply and thanked Logan for all his effort. Logan looked down at him and said it was good that Philip recognized his own work, and starting next week, he would receive 1% of the total sales as his personal cut. Philip suddenly started shouting that he would do his best, and even tried to kiss Logan. All of this happened while a mysterious figure watched from the street, his wrinkled face hidden beneath a hood, and his beard glowing blonde in the light. Later, inside a sorcery shop, Logan was using the communication line and suddenly shouted from the back of the room that it would be at least 10 tons of gold per year, which instantly made everyone nearby turn their heads toward him. He froze mid-sentence, staring straight at the door. then asked the person on the other end if they were serious. That person was Hamar, who calmly confirmed the information. Hamar explained that according to the miners, there was a very high chance the gold nuggets were located in a deeper layer of the hill. Logan stared at the communication orb like a complete madman, clenching his teeth and fists so hard they trembled. Even with a rough estimate, 10 tons of gold translated into around 100 million gold coins. To him, this was the ultimate jackpot, the biggest lottery win he could ever imagine. Hamar added that the mining costs were no joke, and asked Logan if he could actually afford it, since just starting the operation would cost about 5 million gold. Logan assured Hamar that he already had everything he needed. He told him to wait and said he would gather all the money and workers as fast as possible. Hamar didn't look too worried and simply asked Logan to go easy on the workers. Later that night, in the middle of the city, Logan walked through the streets while thinking about how the initial investment for the mine would be around 5 million gold. If he kept selling as he was earning roughly 4.5 million gold per month. Come to think of it, even if he only sold for 2 months, he would still have money left over, since he still had about 700 boxes of medicine in stock. He started thinking about going back home to get more merchandise and beginning the mental development stuff, but something suddenly caught his attention and snapped him out of his trance. Logan looked toward a shop and sensed that someone was inside. In an instant, he rushed over, thinking it might be robbers. He violently kicked the door open, sending it slamming into the wall, and began searching the place from top to bottom, but the room looked completely empty. Logan drew his sword, wondering if the culprits had somehow vanished, then reminded himself there was only one door. They had to still be inside. Just as that thought crossed his mind, a shadow zipped past him. He realized it too late and slashed at the cloaked figure, but missed. He shouted, demanding to know who was there. When he turned around, no one was in sight. He stood still with his sword pointed at nothing, his heart pounding. Impossible, he thought. He was absolutely sure he had felt someone there. Then that feeling came again. He looked up, guessing the thief might be on the roof. Without hesitating, he leaped upward. Aiming at the cloaked figure, he raised his sword, ready to stab. But the culprit moved at the last second. Logan faced the figure on the rooftop, sword in hand. He demanded to know the man's identity, but got no answer. Instead, the figure simply vanished without leaving a trace. Logan was completely stunned by what had just happened. He kept thinking about how there was no sign of any presence, even though the guy had been right in front of him moments ago. He looked down at his own hand and realized he was holding a piece of the man's cloak. He stared at it, wondering what the hell had just happened. The next morning, Logan told Philip about the incident, and together they concluded that an aura-using thief had infiltrated their shop. Logan said he was only speculating, but that the intruder was at least an advanced force user. That was a term used for people even more powerful than high-rank knights. He added that it wasn't just a feeling. That guy wasn't merely high rank, he was on a whole different level. Philip was shocked that someone who could use aura was committing petty theft. Aura was enough to turn even a slave into a noble, so he couldn't understand why someone like that would be running around stealing. He asked what the man had taken. Logan replied that it was exactly what Philip was thinking. He had stolen only 2 pills of the medicine, emporic, just that. Hearing this, Logan concluded that if he only stole 2 pills, it wasn't for money. He had taken them to use himself. Philip then asked if there were also impotent people among aura users. That's when it clicked for Logan, and he agreed. Logan asked if there were any names of aura users on the informant's list, but Philip said there weren't. The informant had asked for an extra fee for that information since it was top secret, and Philip had refused. But after thinking about it again, Philip said maybe there was one person who came to mind. An aura user in the capital who had no descendants. A muscular, well-dressed, noble with blonde hair and a beard, was walking down the street with his wife, watching some children play. His face looked gentle, and his light blue eyes were filled with longing as he stared at them. He was startled when his wife asked what he was looking at. He turned and told her he was just admiring the scenery outside, sweating nervously. She clearly didn't buy that lame excuse, and asked if he was staring at the children again. He tried to convince her he was only enjoying the view and wasn't thinking about anything silly. Then he hugged his wife and said they should go home. She kind of ignored that and instead told him she was very happy to have met him, asking if he knew that. The man looked at her with happiness in his eyes and a small smile tugging at his mustache. He hugged her even tighter and said he felt the same. This man was Felix Esperanza, the kingdom's greatest swordsman. It turned out that the deep sadness and regret in his heart started with an injustice he suffered when he was young. While fighting for the country, he had been wounded right between the legs. At the time, it was just considered a wound of honor for a knight who fell in battle, and since he was young, he didn't think much of it. But later in life, Felix kept wondering what the point was of holding the title of duke and being known as the strongest in the nation if he had no son to succeed him. To him, it all felt meaningless. A memory from the past appeared, showing Felix explaining his situation to his wife. She was far more understanding than he expected, so much so that he was shocked. She acknowledged that he must have suffered a lot and asked with tears in her eyes if he was okay with it. saying she wanted to stay by his side and serve him. Seeing that, Felix wondered if there was any way he could ever repay the immense love he had received. Later, Felix was seen strolling through a path in the castle gardens with one of his servants. The servant warned him that the family meeting was about to begin and asked if he was sure he didn't need to hurry. Felix replied that arriving early was pointless anyway, since the only thing that would happen was everyone pressuring him to produce an heir. The servant hesitated, then carefully mentioned that a very effective medicine had recently started circulating in the capital. Hearing that, Felix asked sarcastically if that was really true. The servant went on, saying that apparently the medicine even cured physical injuries, but Felix still didn't seem interested. The servant insisted, explaining that he knew Felix didn't believe in these things, but there were many reports of people who had amazing results. Hearing this, Felix lowered his head, ashamed to admit to himself that he had already tried the medicine, and on top of that, he had stolen it. Even though his wife's tears still weighed on him, he couldn't believe he had stooped so low as theft, a disgrace to the discipline he had always upheld. Worse, after taking the medicine, absolutely nothing had happened. So he told Louise, his servant, not to believe everything he heard. He began convincing himself that he was right, that the story about the medicine working was just a fake rumor, and that there was no way it could fix something, even Aura couldn't. He thought he should have given up already. At the gates of the estate, Logan was talking to a guard who told him he couldn't let him meet Felix without an appointment. Logan calmly asked the guard to simply tell Felix his name, saying he was sure Felix would want to meet him as soon as he knew who was asking. Earlier, Logan and Philip had talked about this, and Philip had been shocked, asking if Logan was really planning to visit the Duke in person. Logan had nodded, and Philip started teasing him, asking if he was going to chase down the strongest man in the kingdom, just to ask whether he stole something, or if he was impotent. Philip freaked out and asked if that was seriously Logan's plan, but Logan calmly asked if Philip was imitating him. Philip told him he should act like nothing had happened, otherwise he'd get into trouble for no reason, warning that if things went south, they were screwed. Sitting in a chair in a hallway, Logan thought Philip wasn't wrong, but if the guy from yesterday really was the Sword Duke, he couldn't let this opportunity slip away. A butler came out of a room, opened a beautifully carved wooden door, and told Logan to enter. Inside, Felix was waiting by the window. As Logan approached the Sword Duke, he thought this was his chance to build a positive connection with one of the strongest people in the kingdom. He greeted Felix politely, stating his name and that he was the eldest son of House Mlan. Looking closely at Felix, Logan noticed something strange. Even though the man was around 70 years old, he looked much younger. Logan figured he must be suppressing his aging, using his powerful aura. Felix confirmed that House Mlan was in the southwest, and asked why Logan had come all that way. Logan thought he didn't need to reveal the real reason immediately, and said he had recently opened a business in the capital, so he brought some products as a gift. He slid a small box across the table toward Felix, and explained that it was an excellent medicine for men, with proven effectiveness among countless nobles. Felix studied the box and asked if that was really true, without giving any hint that he already knew something. Logan kept his head slightly bowed, feeling confused and unsure whether Felix was actually the thief from yesterday. He decided to push things further. He said that someone superhuman like Felix wouldn't need something so ordinary, so he had brought something more special instead. That finally made Felix show a small reaction. Logan was secretly happy, realizing that Felix's initial disinterest came from the fact that he hadn't felt any effect after using emporic. It turned out that in the current version of emporic, the poison in the monster meat was neutralized just enough for use as an aphrodisiac. But that mild poison had no effect on the body of a superhuman like Felix, so Logan had concentrated that poison again and again, creating a far more potent concentrate. He told Felix it was a limited edition version of emporic, and that finally sparked the man's interest. In reality, it was simply 50 emporic pills compressed into one. Logan guaranteed the effect, explaining that the excruciating pain alone could kill a normal human, but for an aura user, it was a completely different story. Logan told Felix that if the pill satisfied him, he would be glad to hear from him and would prepare another batch in whatever quantity Felix wanted, ensuring complete discretion. The next day, Felix looked radiant, clear proof that the pill had worked. He then told Logan he would grant him any favor within his power. Logan nearly exploded with happiness inside, but forced himself to stay calm, and said he didn't understand what Felix meant. Felix explained that an aura user is a master who controls both body and life energy, so he could be sure of the treatment's effectiveness. The medicine worked perfectly not just the first time, but over about 30 uses. The effect accumulated until he fully recovered. That heavy longing and pain in his chest were finally fading away. Felix looked at Logan and said he couldn't believe Logan had been so considerate as to bring him a gift without even mentioning his earlier blunder. He also commented that Logan's sword skills that day had been unbelievable for someone his age. Because of that, he was certain Logan was exactly the kind of person you'd expect to have such a miraculous medicine. Poor Felix. He'd been stuck in a dry spell for so long that he'd basically gone insane. He admitted he might have spoken too soon, and revealed that he now saw the possibility of being cured of a chronic illness, thanks to Logan's gift. so he wanted to repay him properly. He asked again what Logan desired. Logan stared down at the floor with a cold expression and replied that in that case he wanted any book on swordsmanship. Felix searched his library and brought him a book, warning that training only by following what was written inside could hurt his body, but that it was still worth reading. After that, Logan thanked him and asked for one more favor to write a letter as proof that he had taken the book. Felix said that would be no problem at all. Logan thought that now he had what he needed, and commented that it was a shame he was only taking one swordsmanship book when the Duke was willing to give him anything. But his real goal was different. Just as he finished that thought, Felix said he had been thinking about it, and that something didn't feel right. Logan asked what he meant, and Felix replied that he would personally teach him a sword technique, which left Logan completely speechless. The kingdom's greatest swordsman was offering to train him. Felix continued, saying he understood Logan's desire to stay humble, but giving him just a low-level sword book wouldn't put his mind at ease. Logan thought that even though he already had the secrets of the divine sword, he'd be crazy to refuse when the strongest man in the kingdom was offering something like this. Ecstatic, he thanked Felix for the opportunity, thinking he had just hit the jackpot once again. In the training grounds, Felix and the young man stood facing each other. Felix remarked that judging the talent of outstanding youths was one of an old man's simple pleasures, so he told Logan to focus, because he wouldn't be holding back at all. Logan steadied his stance and prepared himself. Felix told him to draw his sword, but Logan found himself frozen in place, overwhelmed by the master's aura. A massive pressure crashed down on him, making it impossible for him to even touch his weapon. This was the terrifying power of a high-level aura user. Logan wondered if all of them could do this, imagining how terrifying it would be if paralyzing the body was common among such people. If that were the case, every fight would turn into nothing more than a contest of whose aura was stronger. He quickly realized this wasn't just brute force, but some kind of refined technique. Finally, he managed to draw his sword just a little. He thought he needed to use his force to sharpen his senses, instead of reinforcing his body, and then analyze that strange energy pressing down on him. Every time he tried to move, Felix's force spread outward from its original point. Logan couldn't understand how something like that was even possible, but he knew he had to deal with it somehow. He figured that the moment Felix was about to disperse his force, he had to move half a step faster than that. With that thought, Logan assumed a proper fighting stance, his sword now fully drawn. Felix looked at him and calmly said he was talented. Logan was sweating heavily, barely managing to stay upright as Felix told him to pay close attention. Felix seemed to be gathering his aura at the tip of his blade, clearly preparing an attack. As Logan struggled against the crushing presence, fear locked his body in place. When he looked up, he finally understood what he was facing. Felix's blade of force. He stared straight ahead, knowing the attack was coming, but there was a serious problem. Felix's aura was simply too strong for him to handle. He felt as if the Duke's force was invading his body, scrambling his senses, while the energy around that red blade kept growing more intense. Desperation filled his mind as he wondered if there was anything he could even do. Then suddenly, he realized something. His own force was neutralizing the Duke's. Turning inward, he knew he couldn't dodge the attack in time, but maybe there was another way. Logan summoned the force inside his body and molded it into a protective circle around himself. Seeing that, Felix was stunned, wondering if Logan was really planning to block his attack using force. Immediately after, the master swordsman shifted into an aggressive stance, his blade pulled behind his back and charged with energy, ready to strike Logan down. He stepped forward and leaped at the young man, with a murderous glare. Logan braced himself in a defensive posture, his sword held in front of him and wrapped in his protective aura, while a shiver of fear ran down his spine. As expected, Felix's blow slammed into him head-on and sent him flying backward. Logan crashed into the wall, and even his sword seemed to suffer damage. Felix, meanwhile, didn't even look winded. He stood there calmly, staring at Logan with a cold, unreadable gaze. Using his shattered sword as support, Logan tried to stand up, but his body was trembling. His blade was broken into pieces, and all he could think about was what had just happened. Felix turned toward him and asked if he really thought he would teach him something Logan couldn't eventually figure out on his own. He then revealed that he had seen everything, and pointed out that without even realizing it, Logan had gone completely serious at the end. With a proud look on his face, Felix praised him, amazed that Logan had faced the attack head-on, thinking that some people were simply born to stand out. As Logan finally passed out, Felix commented that it would be entertaining to watch him grow even stronger. A little later, Felix's butler asked Logan if he was leaving already, adding that the Duke had invited him to stay until he fully recovered. Logan replied that it was fine, and that thanks to the potion Felix had given him, he felt completely okay. Hearing that, the butler said he would walk him to the door. Outside, he wished Logan a safe journey, and Logan thanked him. After that, Logan quickly walked away, vanishing from the butler's sight, leaving him wondering how Logan had disappeared so fast. Turning a corner, Logan kept moving while limping slightly from the pain of Felix's attack. It hurt like hell, but he wasn't about to waste such a valuable potion on a minor injury. He couldn't believe the Duke had given him a superior grade potion, something practically impossible to find, as if it were nothing. Logan thought that his own power had already evolved enough to heal internal wounds by itself, but the damage Felix had caused would be much harder to deal with. In the end, he looked at the potion and muttered that either way, he had gained far more than he had lost. Then Logan took out a note Felix had given him, with the coordinates for the mansion's communication channel. Felix had told him that if Logan ever had any problems, he could just get in touch. Logan felt genuinely happy, thinking about how Felix had actually come to view him favorably. To him, it felt like Felix was practically treating him like a disciple, and that relationship would definitely be useful in the future. Just as that thought crossed his mind, Philip suddenly appeared from behind, scaring Logan badly. Logan turned his head and asked what Philip was doing there, and Philip replied that he had been waiting at a distance for Logan to come out. The moment Logan showed up, Philip asked why he looked so pale. Worried, he practically shouted at him, asking if Logan had done or said something rude to anger the Duke. Logan replied that it was the complete opposite, and that he had just had a small swordsmanship lesson with the noble. Suddenly, he coughed and blood sprayed from his mouth, terrifying Philip. Seeing that, Philip panicked and said he was going to prepare everything for them to flee, and would get the fastest horses available. Logan tried to explain that Philip was completely misunderstanding the situation, but Philip kept muttering and didn't listen at all. A week later, at Logan and Philip's shop, a notice on the door announced that emporic was out of stock and asked customers to come back later. Inside, Logan appeared with a victorious expression and declared that their total profit from emporic sales had reached an impressive 4.1 million gold coins. Impressed, Philip replied that if sales kept going at this pace, surpassing 4.5 million gold in a month wouldn't be difficult either. They exchanged confident looks and let out a cheer of joy that echoed outside the shop. But the celebration didn't last long. Logan, suddenly serious again, asked Philip if he was so happy that he didn't need a bonus this month. Philip instantly snapped back to reality and begged him not to ruin his daydreams. Then Logan commented that he had made sure the monster meat they bought at the market would be processed without any issues, and he praised Philip for doing a great job. Next, Philip suggested that Logan consider buying a house in the capital to reduce accommodation costs, but Logan dismissed the idea, explaining that they would only be in the capital for another year and a half, so it didn't make sense to invest that much. He told Philip to stay focused on emporic for now, adding that they would eventually have to move anyway. When Philip asked what he meant by that, Logan simply said it was something he didn't need to worry about. Finally, Philip asked Logan to take better care of his health, saying he was shocked to see him coughing up blood earlier. Logan replied that that was exactly why he had locked himself in his room for an entire week. Hearing that, Philip asked if Logan had really been resting, since every time he went into the room, he saw Logan sitting at his desk doing something. Once again, Logan cut him off, telling him it was none of his business. Philip complained that Logan kept way too many secrets, but Logan was secretly glad that even while grumbling, Philip didn't push the issue. If Rick had been there instead, he would have dug until he found out everything. Philip then asked if Logan was going home already, and Logan confirmed it, asking him to find a way to calm the customers until he could send more emporic. On top of that, Logan said he had one more thing to tell him. He instructed Philip to send food rations worth 100,000 gold coins per month to both the Tesseron and Mlan estates. Hearing that, Philip was stunned, and asked if Logan planned to feed the entire region with that much food. Logan cut him off, saying that was enough muttering, and that they needed to do this for a whole year, so Philip should start looking for a supplier. Philip realized Logan was completely serious, and commented that he never imagined Logan valued his people so much, but that wasn't quite true. As he prepared to leave, Logan thought that it wasn't about valuing them, it was something he absolutely had to do. It would take at least a year to solve the food shortage in Mlan. He knew the people's labor was a crucial part of his plan, so he couldn't let them starve. Logan got ready to leave and casually told Philip he had work to do, so he was heading out. Philip didn't even bother asking for details, already knowing it was just another one of Logan's secrets. Elsewhere, a group of poor people were huddled together on the cold floor of what looked like a warehouse, using whatever scraps of cloth they could find to keep themselves warm. One guy, his face bleeding, just stared down at the floor in silence, completely broken. Meanwhile, Logan was inside a magic shop, handing a piece of paper to a sorcerer. The wizard glanced at the list and asked if Logan seriously intended to track down all the people written there. He hesitated, explaining that with only names and a few traits, the task would mean searching the entire continent. Logan didn't even flinch, and calmly asked if he could do the job or not, adding that he would pay very generously. The sorcerer looked at the paper again, clearly unsure, then after a short pause reluctantly agreed. As Logan left, he thought that just as expected, it wouldn't be easy to find them. After all, even the names he had might be fake. Still, he had no other choice. He needed to gather every independent superhuman he could find, no matter the cost. These were the people who had reached that stage in his past life but never joined any organization. Every single one of them would become a critical ally in the upcoming war against the Empire. especially one specific mercenary who had once fought on the Empire's side. While walking, Logan suddenly stopped. He let out a sharp breath and realized he'd been rushing things way too much. With everything going smoothly in the capital, he was moving too fast. He looked up at the sky and reminded himself that he actually had plenty of time. He could afford to slow down, but that belief that he had plenty of time might not be true at all. In a dark room that looked like a dungeon, a man tried to calm down a furious elder chief. The old man was completely possessed by rage, shouting that someone was mistreating his disciples, and demanding to know if the man had other henchmen, even mentioning some tower master. The man explained that he was only there to deliver information, but the elder didn't care at all. His fury stayed uncontrollable. Then the elder demanded to know why his disciple had been summoned this time. The man replied that the young man had been sent to the far southwest countryside, to the Mlan region, for a 6-month business trip. Hearing that, the elder slammed a heavy hand on the man's shoulder and declared that he wouldn't let the magic tower master get away with this. This time, he insisted, the matter would be settled once and for all. Next, the scene shifts to the massive and imposing Earth Magic Tower in the Kingdom of Grandia. Inside, a man approached a desk where another man was fast asleep. He greeted him, and the sleepy attendant blinked and looked up. The moment he recognized the visitor, he stood up cheerfully and welcomed him. Curious about who this young man was, the employee silently wondered what Logan's deal was. At first, he assumed he was a noble, but seeing him now in a cheap suit made him start doubting that. The attendant figured there was no way he was there to meet a high-ranking mage and hoped Logan would just buy some basic scrolls. Smiling politely, he listened as Logan asked for 150 scrolls of destruction magic, which instantly caught him off guard. Even so, he kept his face cold. Then, Logan pulled out his Cooper bank account certificate and asked the attendant to take a look. As the man began counting the funds, his disbelief only grew. The total came to a ridiculous 4 million gold, leaving him completely stunned. He looked down, visibly shaken, then stammered and offered to personally escort Logan to the upper floor. Logan listened calmly. Destruction magic was a 4th circle, area of effect spell capable of bringing down stone walls. However, because of drawbacks like slow activation time and very obvious casting signs, it was rarely used in combat. Even so, Logan saw massive potential in it for construction, believing it could speed up development by a crazy amount. Logan soon found himself speaking with an older man who asked if he really wanted to buy 150 scrolls. Logan replied that he absolutely did. The man, Radius Great, the master of the Earth Magic Tower, didn't hide his nervousness, since it had been ages since they'd had such a wealthy client. Logan remembered how just minutes earlier, the master had come running the moment he heard Logan wanted 155 scrolls, which was a pretty strange reaction for someone of his status. It turned out Radius had been Tower Master for 5 generations, yet he only had 1.5 million gold to his name, showing just how bad the tower's finances were. Logan immediately realized that this weakness worked in his favor, so he told Radius that his own house, Mlan, was nothing more than a bunch of petty thieves from the southwest, and he understood if the master had never even heard of them. Hearing that, Radius apologized to Logan, admitting that his young apprentice had made a mistake and promising he would scold him severely. Logan waved it off, saying it wasn't necessary. The master replied that Logan was extremely generous. All the while, the guy at the counter was internally freaking out. The master, however, looked irritated, thinking he had almost lost such an easy catch like Logan. Even with Logan insisting, Radius fell into silent thought. In these peaceful times, earth magic was more useful for farming and construction. He couldn't understand which noble would spend so much money on expensive scrolls for something so trivial. Frustrated, he thought about the fools gossiping that the magic tower had weakened since he became master. On top of that, it seemed he had burned through the tower's budget way too fast. After sizing things up, he decided it was lucky Logan looked like an easy target. He resolved to handle the young man carefully and squeeze as much money out of him as possible. With that in mind, Radius told Logan that, to be honest, there might be a problem fulfilling his request. Curious, Logan asked what the issue was. The master explained that making a 4th circle scroll required supervision by at least a 5th circle mage, and unfortunately, the tower was short on experienced staff. Logan didn't even look bothered. He just stared at Radius and bluntly asked what he planned to do about it. Radius was caught off guard. That wasn't the reaction he expected. But he kept going, explaining that the unit cost to produce each scroll was extremely high. Hearing that, Logan calmly stood up and said it was a shame nothing could be done. He headed toward the door, telling the master that his original plan was to buy 150 scrolls every single month, but if the tower couldn't handle that quantity, he'd take his business to the royal family's magic tower instead. Radius panicked. He jumped in front of Logan and blocked his path, desperately asking if Logan seriously planned to buy 150 scrolls every month. Logan confirmed it, adding that over the next 6 months, he'd need a total of 900 scrolls. The master looked like he'd just reached heaven, staring at Logan as if he were an angel sent by the gods. Logan then casually pointed out that if producing 150 scrolls at once was already hard for them, a 6-month order would be an even bigger nightmare. As Logan turned to leave again, Radius did something dramatic. He threw himself to the floor and grabbed Logan's boot, shouting that they would handle the order. Logan asked if he really thought that was possible. Radius replied that it was 100% feasible. While dusting off Logan's shoes with his robe, he continued, saying each scroll cost 10,000 gold, meaning 150 scrolls would come to 1.5 million gold. Radius's eyes were shining with greed as he quickly realized that with Logan's planned purchases, he could earn over 9 million gold in the next 6 months. After finishing his little performance, he stood up and proposed an alternative. He suggested that hiring mages might be a better option. Confused, Logan asked which mages he was talking about. Normally, mediocre mages were preferred for dirty work, so he couldn't understand why the master would offer to lend him mages, which would be even more expensive. Logan thought that with a 4th circle mage, he could match the output of 300 scrolls per month and asked if they had any 4th circle mages willing to work on a construction site. Radius clarified that there had been a misunderstanding. Not even he had the authority to casually command a 4th circle mage. Instead, he offered to send 2 to 9 N circle mages and 1 to 3 RD circle mages. He explained that these mages were disciples with a lot of teamwork experience. In exchange, he asked Logan to reduce the number of scrolls. Logan considered the offer carefully, thinking it might actually be a good deal. Sending a team of mages could be more efficient. Still, he hesitated, wondering what kind of people these construction-specialized mages would really be. Sometime later, a group of exhausted, ragged young men appeared in front of Logan. They looked like they had just crawled back from a war zone, and he was genuinely shocked by how bad their condition was. The warrior struggled to find the right words to say. Right at that moment, the Tower Master cut in and told the group they could return to their quarters. The men ran off immediately, visibly scared, leaving Logan standing there a bit lost. Annoyed, he turned to the master and commented that those guys looked like they were about to collapse. The master agreed, but assured him they were the youngest people with the most construction experience in the entire Magic Tower, real experts in the field. Logan reflected on that and thought that despite their rough appearance, the mages did seem pretty capable. With one master at the 3rd circle and several experts among them, all in their 20s, they were clearly promising talents. Even with all that, Logan stayed suspicious. He didn't trust that the Tower Master would actually send his disciples out to the countryside, so he confronted him, saying that exchanging 2nd circle mages for the scrolls didn't sound like a fair deal at all. The master replied, calmly assuring him that a team of 10 mages would be more than sufficient. Hearing that, Logan once again flashed that familiar murderous smile. Still smiling, he started negotiating with the master. He proposed that 120 magic scrolls, plus the dispatch of 10 mages, would be done for a price of 1.2 million gold per month. The master tried to keep his composure, but he was visibly shaken by what he'd just heard. Logan thought it was almost a steal, considering how talented those mages were, and that even he wouldn't send ordinary mages out for that price. He was still amazed when he saw the master actually agreeing to the deal. The master then pulled out a contract and insisted that Logan sign it immediately. Logan looked down at the paper, wondering how anyone in their right mind could agree to those terms, and in the rush, the ink hadn't even dried properly yet. Logan felt like something was off. Suddenly, the big elder chief Clayton burst through the door behind him, with 2 disciples desperately trying to hold him back. The elder chief shouted at the master, saying he'd heard everything he was doing with the disciples and that they were going to have a little chat right there and then. Clayton, a 5th circle mage, was absolutely furious and confronted the master, demanding to know if he was planning to send his disciple on yet another mission. The master replied that everything he did was for the good of the tower. Clayton shot back, asking why only his disciples were always assigned to the most difficult tasks, pointing out that the master wasn't sending just anyone, but the young people who had literally just returned from other missions. The master retorted that the young were capable of enduring hardship. Clayton accused him of mistreating the disciples ever since he himself had become an elder last year. The master dismissed the complaint, saying Clayton had lost his mind. As Logan watched the whole scene play out, he started to understand the power dynamics. Clayton reaching the 5th circle at such a young age clearly made him a threat to the Tower Master, who was taking out his frustrations on the younger disciples. Despite all the tension, Logan stayed calm, quietly satisfied that this internal conflict was playing straight into his hands. The Tower Master then turned to Clayton and coldly declared that if he wasn't willing to follow orders, he didn't care about their fate at all. He told Clayton and his disciples to leave right now if they wanted, and the elder asked if he was serious. Hearing that ultimatum, Clayton began to channel his magic, clearly preparing for a fight. Even with a clash about to explode, the master stayed impassive and asked Clayton if he really wanted to go through with it. While Clayton was charging his magic, the ground around the two of them started shaking. One of the disciples realized how dangerous this was and shouted that they needed to stop those two. Clayton then yelled at the Tower Master to get ready. The master just stood there, watching Clayton take a fighting stance. And then, out of nowhere, Logan slammed his hand down on the table with force. Everyone's attention snapped to him. He looked completely unfazed by the chaos around him. Both of them were speechless at what Logan had just done, and the young disciples were also in disbelief. Logan calmly showed them the piece of paper he had just stamped. It was the contract he was supposed to sign with the Tower Master, now fully finalized. He then simply told the 10 people waiting in the room to follow him. After that, he addressed both Clayton and the Tower Master. He told them to sort their mess out themselves and warned that the contract would still be valid even if the Tower Master got replaced, so there would be no problem with the business either way. The Tower Master admitted how pathetic they both must have looked in front of a guest and told Logan he would send the scrolls as soon as they were ready. But Clayton cut him off, saying he wasn't finished talking to him yet. The Master snapped back, asking if he was trying to force the official contract of the Earth Magic Tower right there, and scolded him, telling him to know his place. Clayton then shot back that if that was the case, then his decision was final. He would follow his disciples too. Both Logan and the Tower Master were completely dumbfounded by Clayton's attitude. The Master exclaimed that Clayton had to be insane. An elder following his disciples to a construction site was unheard of. Logan immediately shouted that he never hired a fifth circle mage. Clayton replied that he didn't want to be paid separately, and that he just planned to cooperate to help his disciples and finish the job faster. Hearing that, Logan bowed respectfully before the elder and promised to serve him with full devotion. Clayton then simply asked Logan to delay his disciples' departure by 1 day so they could recover before heading out again. Logan agreed to the request and told the Tower Master to meet him tomorrow at noon at the West Gate. The next day, a carriage rolled out through the Magic Tower's gate. Logan was already outside, leaning casually against the wall with a backpack slung over his shoulder, waiting for Clayton and the others. While standing there, he reflected on how yesterday's contract had turned into an absolute jackpot. Hiring a fifth circle mage through a normal contract would have cost at least 1,000,000 gold pieces, and yet he had gotten way more than that, for far less. The young man thought about how badly he wanted to return to his territory as fast as possible. He still needed to send more emporic to the capital and take care of a bunch of other things. His thoughts were cut off when someone suddenly shouted his name. Someone was calling for him. It turned out to be Rena, who admitted it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Logan greeted her casually by name, but Rena immediately cut him off, saying they weren't close enough for that kind of intimacy. Realizing the situation had just gotten awkward, Logan caught the hint and corrected himself right away, treating her more formally as the Princess of the Wolves, agreeing that it really had been a long time since they last met. He even added that she was being rude as always. Rena looked down at him from her luxurious carriage, hiding half her face behind a fan. She said there were rumors going around in the capital, and that she'd heard Logan was getting involved in some pretty shady business. Then she asked if the Mlan family wasn't going through a tough time. Deep down, what she actually wanted to know was if his family had finally gone broke. Logan kept his cool, and replied with maximum politeness that, as Rena should know, he was very ambitious about making money, and that his family's situation was none of her business. Once again, Rena got on his nerves, and said she knew the amount she gave him. When they broke off, the engagement wasn't small, but that it was probably normal for a thief like him. Logan honestly felt like slapping her just for fun. Anxious to get rid of Rena as fast as possible, he agreed with the comment and tried to walk off in the opposite direction, tossing out a dismissive remark about her being so filthy he'd rather avoid her. But just as he was about to leave, Rena stopped him again, mentioning she had heard about his deeds in the feudal war, about how he had used some special weapon. She then asked what he would think about selling it to her. Trying to stay polite, while desperately wanting to escape this conversation, Logan downplayed the weapon's importance, saying it was no big deal, and that while he was embarrassed, he'd have to decline the offer. After that, he basically fled from Rena's carriage, which honestly felt like the smartest move. She watched him with pure disgust from the window as he walked away. Logan thought about how even after becoming famous in the capital for selling impotent medicine, not a single noble had shown any interest in the feudal war in the countryside, not even Rena. If anything, the wolves were way too involved in this. He reflected that the structure of the crossbow he built was very simple, so he only hoped to use it a few more times before the plans fell into the wrong hands and everyone started manufacturing it. Right then, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Clayton with his disciples. He said he expected to find Logan at the West Gate and asked what he was doing coming over to their side instead. Logan started physically pushing Clayton and the others in the direction he wanted to go and told them he had run into someone annoying earlier. Suddenly, 3 carriages came tearing through the woods. Logan was riding with Clayton in one of them, along with one of his disciples. Clayton looked like an angry parrot, huffing non-stop. He turned his head toward Logan and commented that the carriage was spacious enough for 5 or 6 people, and that the coachman seemed very experienced. He concluded that Logan had spent a lot of money to make them comfortable. Then Clayton's mood soured, saying Logan didn't need to bother with all that pomp, and that he had wasted money for nothing. Meanwhile, the disciple tried to calm him down, but it didn't really work. Hearing all this, Logan looked at Clayton and thought it wouldn't be the first time a mage had shown exaggerated pride, so he told Clayton that he was honored to serve such powerful mages and that everything he did was just the bare minimum. After all, he had basically hired a 5th circle mage for free, so flattering him wasn't a problem at all. Clayton didn't respond, he just stared out the window, keeping his grumpy attitude. After night fell, Logan and the others set up camp. Logan commented that it was too late to travel any further, so they would rest there and continue their journey tomorrow. After that, Logan lit a fire and started meditating, when suddenly a man with a knife appeared, ready to attack. The man threw the knife at Logan, who sensed the danger and ducked his head to dodge it. Without even interrupting his meditation, Logan calmly asked who was there. One of the men stepped out of the shadows and praised his dodge. Logan stood up as the man continued, saying he had heard all the rumors about him in the capital, and asked if Logan wasn't the guy who made a fortune selling some weird drug. Logan realized he was surrounded by 5 guys and figured they were probably robbers. He let out an annoyed huff and said he just wanted to practice what he had learned through meditation. But honestly, this was the perfect opportunity. Since they had interrupted him, he drew his sword and warned the bandits that they were about to become his training partners. One of the bandits mocked him, laughing and jeering. Logan didn't even react. Without hesitation, Logan slit the bandit's throat in one clean motion, silencing his laughter instantly. 2 of the others stared at their fallen comrade, completely unable to understand how Logan had moved so fast, and one of them called him a bastard. Another bandit jumped in to attack. Logan took an aggressive stance. The moment the bandit got close, ready to plunge his knife into him, Logan dodged and sliced his belly in a single swift motion, sending him flying through the air. The guy crashed into a tree and seemed to have passed out. 2 men were already down, leaving only 3. One of the bandits realized there was no way they could beat Logan and shouted for the others to run. That's when he noticed he couldn't move his legs at all. At that moment, Logan started charging his aura, and the way he held his sword looked strangely familiar. He was copying Felix's movements. Logan forced enough mana into his sword to replicate the attack Felix had taught him. The aura blade was ready. He planted his foot on the ground and cut through the air with absurd force. The strike hit 2 of the opponents squarely, knocking them down instantly. Then something weird happened. He suddenly lost the aura he had managed to conjure, which left him confused for a second. Logan figured this ability must be hard to maintain for long. He looked at the last bandit, who had fallen to the ground, absolutely terrified. Logan smiled. He had managed to use the move at its maximum level thanks to Felix. While Logan was distracted, the last bandit started crawling away, trying to escape. Logan thought about how focusing and compressing the force through the new authority had created that aura earlier. Along with the pressure blade he learned from the Duke, Felix had also shown him the force blade, which was a weaker version of the attack. But Logan knew it was impossible to imitate that at his current level. His cheeks flushed as he muttered that he couldn't believe he had actually managed to use the force blade, even if only for a brief moment. Then he noticed the last bandit still trying to escape, and turned his head in that direction. Logan stared at him while the man cried. Realizing just how screwed he was, Logan prepared to attack again, which terrified the poor guy even more. Walking toward him, Logan explained to himself that using the force coming from the sword to dominate the enemy created the ability known as the pressure blade. And just as he was about to stab the last bandit, Logan flashed that predatory smile again. He said this ability should be enough to use in a real fight. After killing him, he glanced at the bodies around and wondered if he had overdone it a little. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him, taking Logan completely by surprise, saying he had witnessed everything. The speaker was Clayton, and he looked furious. Logan turned toward him, confused about why he was angry, wondering if Clayton thought he had gone too far even though those guys were robbers. If Clayton decided not to work with him anymore, Logan would be in serious trouble. But that wasn't what happened. Clayton stared at the young man, and, to Logan's shock, praised his skills, saying he was incredible. Logan stood there, stunned and speechless for a moment. Still grumpy as ever, Clayton added that even though he didn't understand much about force users, what he had just seen wasn't normal for someone Logan's age. Logan thanked him for the compliment, saying he was being too generous, and realized Clayton wasn't actually angry, it was just his face. Clayton and Logan walked together through the forest, and an awkward silence hung between them. Logan glanced sideways, thinking about how he had purposely moved away from the camp to avoid exposing his powers. He wondered if Clayton had followed him all this way just to find him. Breaking the silence, Clayton commented that his disciples were struggling because they didn't have the best teacher, and that was why he was trying to teach them as much as he could. Logan reassured him that he was already doing a good job, and asked why Clayton felt the need to share this with him. Hearing that, Clayton stopped walking, turned his head toward Logan, and warned that even after they reached Logan's territory, he wanted his disciples to take breaks and have chances to train with him. Clayton then said he would work as much as necessary to make sure they got this opportunity, and asked if they could have an understanding. Logan agreed immediately. Logan looked down and noticed something strange. He saw mana flowing up from the ground behind Clayton, wondering where it was going. It turned out the mana was flowing toward the tent where the mages were sleeping. Once again, Clayton looked at Logan and asked if they had a deal, while Logan kept wondering why Clayton would go to such extreme lengths to share his mana with his disciples. Logan acknowledged that Clayton was taking great care of them. Clayton replied that as a teacher, he had to do the bare minimum. Logan questioned if fighting the Tower Master for them wasn't doing more than the minimum, but Clayton shot back that the Tower Master was the one who picked the fight. The next day, the flags of the McLean estate waved proudly in the wind. Inside his father's office, Logan was talking with Patrick, who had clearly heard about his son's travels, and asked if he had gained much experience during his time in the capital. Logan replied that everything he learned there had been insanely helpful. Patrick nodded and said that, in that case, it was fine, then asked if his son had anything else to report. Hearing that, Logan thought he probably could have approached the topic in a smoother way. He casually mentioned that his business in the capital was thriving. That single sentence left Patrick completely speechless. Standing up from behind his desk, Patrick asked what business he was even talking about. Logan explained that he had been selling the medicine he had given him before. Patrick looked like he was about to faint and asked if Logan had really gone all the way to the capital just to sell a stimulant. Putting a hand on his forehead, Patrick reminded him that even though he had promised not to interfere, this was still a massive shock. Then he told Logan to be more careful with the family's reputation next time. Logan quickly promised he would, feeling relieved that Patrick was taking it way better than he had expected. Then he added that he had also befriended the Sword Duke. Hearing that, Patrick froze and immediately asked if he meant Felix Esperanza. Then Patrick suddenly got furious and demanded to know if Logan had also sold the medicine to Felix. With a calm smile, Logan replied that he had done exactly that. Enraged, Patrick shouted, asking how far Logan planned to drag the family's reputation through the mud. Completely unfazed, Logan pulled out a book Felix had given him and said that in return, he had received a valuable intermediate-level sword technique. Patrick, now calmer, took the book from Logan's hands and read the title out loud, Iron Blood Sword. He commented that it was a genuine intermediate sword technique, guaranteed by the Sword Duke himself. But Logan knew that wasn't entirely true, since he was the one who had written that title. He reflected on how, in his past life, an imperial merchant had unearthed the Iron Blood Sword from ancient ruins. It had been considered one of the best intermediate sword techniques of its time. At first, the merchant had only copied and sold it to a select few, but eventually it leaked, and copies of the full technique spread all over the market. Over time, it became so common that even ordinary people managed to learn it. Logan figured that wouldn't happen for another 10 years in this life, so having the family's knights learn it now would be a huge advantage. He also thought that if they added the sword's chi and the divine secrets of the sword on top of it, his father and Ronian could use it as a real trump card. That said, the Iron Blood Sword technique pushed raw strength to the extreme, and to prevent it from causing internal damage, Patrick would normally never allow something like that. But slapping the Sword Duke's name on the book would almost guarantee Patrick accepted it. Patrick flipped through the contents and commented that this was on a completely different level from the records their family had passed down. His hands trembled slightly as he held the book, realizing that in reality, acquiring intermediate sword skills was insanely difficult. He thought that was the reason he had been stuck at the same level for 10 years. Patrick then told Logan that properly mastering this technique would boost the total strength of the Knight Order by at least 30%, and he wondered out loud how they could ever repay the Duke's kindness. Hearing that, Logan thought it was perfect timing because he actually had a proposal. Patrick should also master the technique and show it to Felix. But before Logan could even finish his sentence, Patrick suddenly rushed out of the room. He threw a seal at Logan and said that mastering the technique was now his top priority, leaving Logan in charge of everything until he succeeded. That was the exact moment Logan realized how serious this was. Patrick had just handed him the family crest, the symbol of temporary authority. Patrick shot through the door, yelling at Logan to help Dwayne with the family's responsibilities. He promised he'd return as soon as he mastered the technique perfectly, thanked him in a rush, and disappeared before Logan could bring up any of the things he still wanted to discuss. There Logan stood in his father's office, holding the family crest and looking completely lost. He stared down at the seal, not even sure where to begin, realizing that having this thing meant he could now act freely. Logan silently swore that he would finish everything he wanted to do before Patrick came back. Dwayne burst into the room almost immediately. The idea hadn't even fully sunk in yet, and Dwayne was already shouting that he had heard about all of Logan's exploits in the capital. Dwayne quickly got down to business and started begging for money. Suspicious, Logan asked if he hadn't already received funds from the battle with Tesseron. Dwayne shouted in frustration, explaining that those funds were nowhere near enough to maintain the two fortresses. The war had caused a massive labor shortage, and production was going to drop hard this year. To make things worse, the Kyros had also cut off all aid. Desperate, Dwayne dropped to his knees and begged Logan for money, saying he had heard about the fortune Logan made in the capital. But Logan just smiled and said he was sorry. He had already spent all the cash. Hearing that, Dwayne couldn't believe it and asked where on earth Logan had managed to burn through all that money so fast. Logan just looked down at him, smiling without saying a word. Dwayne looked up and told him to stop messing around, but Logan stayed calm, staring right back at him. Seeing that, Dwayne started sweating. He asked if Logan was serious, and Logan nodded. Dwayne bowed again, totally desperate, and asked where he had even spent that much money. Logan replied that he had spent 1.2 million gold on scrolls and magic mages and had also bought construction materials and food. In other words, there was nothing left. Dwayne repeated what Logan had just said in disbelief, and muttered that buying a little food and handing it out wouldn't make any real difference. That's when Logan dropped the real bomb. He said he had spent 1 million gold just on food. Dwayne wasn't sure he had heard that right and asked him to repeat it. Logan did, saying that he would be distributing 1 million gold worth of food every month for a full year to the people. Hearing that, Dwayne started shouting, asking if Logan had eaten something that made him go insane. Logan thought that was a pretty normal reaction. After all, him becoming a war hero wasn't suddenly going to change Dwayne's opinion of him. Logan calmly told him that he was completely sane and asked if the food he bought was enough. Dwayne confirmed that it was, and then asked what Logan planned to do with the construction materials and scrolls, wondering if he was about to start some massive project. Logan replied simply that they were going to build a dam. 2 weeks later, a notice started circulating all around the city with a blunt message. The feudal lord was summoning everyone for compulsory labor, those from Mlan Fortress to gather at the west gate of the city, and those from Storm Fortress at the east gate. Seeing this, a man from Tesseron Fortress snapped that they had finally hit their limit and that the nobles were exploiting them without mercy. A man from Mlan Fortress added that forcing them into labor right at the peak of harvest season was pure madness. Another voice joined in, saying they had barely survived the battle, only for the feudal lord to now try and crush them anyway. Furious, they started questioning whether the message even gave them a choice: die while fleeing, waste away working, or just starve to death. In the end, they realized every road led to the same ugly ending. Determined, they grabbed pitchforks and whatever tools they could find. Ready to confront the feudal lord in open rebellion, the whole crowd gathered in front of the Mlan estate, and a young man turned to an older one and quietly asked if they were really going to go through with this. The older man answered firmly that the lords were treating them like dogs, while they themselves could barely survive on grass. He looked at the crowd and declared that this time, picking a fight was worth it. A bead of sweat rolled down the young man's forehead as he nodded and agreed, saying he'd rather take the chance and fight back. Right then, the castle gates opened. Driven by sheer determination, the people took their positions. When the gates opened fully, the silhouettes of several knights appeared. One of the knights shouted for his comrades to get ready for the distribution. The crowd, which had been leaning toward a fight just moments ago, calmed down and started wondering what the noble meant by distribution. "I were fivels of lows." The elder stepped forward, warning everyone that it was all a trick. At that exact moment, a man placed a sack in front of him. The knight explained that by order of young Master Logan, anyone who participated in the forced labor would receive a month's worth of grain. He told everyone to line up at the gate so the distribution could begin. Hearing that, the crowd dropped their weapons and rushed to form a line. The old man clutched the sack tightly, staring silently at the ground. He trembled for a moment, then lifted his head and shouted for all to hear, "Hail Logan Mlan!" The people turned toward him as he repeated the cry. Smiles spread across their faces as they agreed with the old man, and soon everyone began hailing Logan. Meanwhile, high up on the estate walls, Logan and Dwayne were talking. Dwayne asked if it had really been necessary to issue a compulsory order just to gather the people, since they could have simply made a request. Logan replied that if he had done it that way, not even a quarter of them would have shown up. After all, no one there trusted the nobles. He explained that nobles saw their people as property, but life as a mercenary had taught him that for common folk, between good nobles and bad nobles, there's really only one difference: which one takes more. Logan told Dwayne that even his own father thought more of the knights than the people, believing knights were the true strength of a nation. That was why, even without money, Patrick still maintained an order of 50 knights. That was exactly why Logan had forced them to gather like this, so they would truly believe. Logan then turned to Dwayne and asked why he was staring at him. Dwayne replied that he was just surprised, saying the young master had been surprising him a lot lately. Logan told Dwayne he was being silly, and that since Dwayne listened to him and trusted him so much, he could go ahead and start the construction. Dwayne got annoyed hearing that again and asked Logan to think it over one more time, saying it made no sense to spend 2 million gold on that construction. He then asked if it was even possible to build it in the first place. Logan replied that Dwayne was starting to sound just like Hamar and Clayton. He said he had already revealed his plan to the two of them, and both had been left speechless at the idea of building a dam. During dinner, they had asked if his intention was to divert the water and build gates. Logan confirmed it, insisting that the project be executed exactly as planned. He explained that the Mlan territory was surrounded by mountains, which made the land unproductive. He added that the mountains to the north were blocking the Ludder River from flowing south. To transform the region, he had instructed Hamar and Clayton to carve a massive hole through those mountains, so the river water could pass through. Hamar, clearly annoyed, replied that it would be easier to believe if Logan had just asked them to tear down the entire mountain. Logan explained that instead, they would build a tunnel connecting directly to the Ludder River, about 30 meters in diameter at the mouth, and that it would function as a gate. He added that this method was used in the western part of the continent, where they called it a dam. In reality, Logan knew that explanation wasn't completely true. It was a flood control method that would only become popular in the Empire about 20 years later. He also didn't fully understand all the principles behind it, but with a Master Dwarf and a 5th Circle Mage at his disposal, Logan believed the project could actually work. If those two led the project, he could transform the western wastelands of Mlan into fertile plains. Clayton was about to comment on the plan, but Hamar cut him off, insisting that choosing the right spot was crucial. He explained that soil composition was fundamental and that they needed to consider water levels to prevent the tunnel from collapsing. They would have to build an arched structure and ask the mages for help. After hearing all that, Clayton turned to Hamar and asked if Logan's idea was really feasible. Hamar, surprised that he had said all that out loud, could hardly believe it himself. Hearing everything, Logan held his wine glass and confidently acknowledged that the plan was possible. That made both Clayton and Hamar start sweating. Hamar, trying to backpedal, began to say that he was already busy with other tasks, including the new mining operation. But before he could finish, Logan interrupted him, explaining that was exactly why he had prepared magic scrolls and mages. Logan then told Hamar that he would leave the task of finding the right mountain to him. Hearing that, Hamar replied somewhat reluctantly that he had suspected something when Logan suddenly decided to take him out for a massive meal. Watching all of this, Clayton wondered if everything that was happening was really okay. At the construction site, Clayton took his position and began concentrating his magic. From a safe distance, 2 workers watched nervously. One of them brushed it off, telling the other that with Logan there, they'd be fine. Omar then shouted to Clayton, saying he could start whenever he was ready. Clayton pressed his magic-infused hand against the mountain, and with a sudden surge of power, the surface shattered into millions of pieces. The people instantly scattered to avoid the flying debris. Seeing the chaos, Hamar rushed over and pushed Clayton aside, reminding him that he had told him to take it easy. Logan, watching the whole thing, started explaining that besides physical strength, there was another power humans could use: mana. In his past life, Logan could barely feel mana at all, but now he could see everything clearly. He was blown away by the power of the earth flowing from the mana circle in Clayton's heart, weaving intricate patterns that stimulated and broke apart the stone wall. Impressed, Logan realized that the development of his force core had supercharged his senses to an absurd level. Clayton turned toward him with a small smile and told the young man to pay attention to the next trick, saying this was just the beginning. At first, Logan wasn't that impressed, but he watched closely as Clayton raised his hand and then suddenly clenched his fist. In the blink of an eye, all the stones from the previous explosion came together and began floating in front of him. Instantly, Logan understood what was happening. The debris was merging to form a gigantic structure. The sheer size of the thing was insane, and the young warrior could only stare upward with his jaw dropped, while a completely terrified Hamar hid behind Logan's leg. Clayton transformed the scattered stones into a massive rock golem. Logan, stunned that Clayton could create something so colossal without any tools, started pondering the possibilities. He muttered to himself that if they could make a few more of these golems, the construction would be finished way faster, and they could even use them in war. Overwhelmed by Clayton's power, Logan grabbed his hands excitedly and asked how many golems he could create. Clayton, also hyped, asked if his students were capable of creating golems too. He then confirmed that since they were from the golem school of the Earth Magic Tower, they definitely could. Logan was glowing with excitement, but Clayton quickly cooled his enthusiasm by pointing out a major limitation. He explained that the magic formula needed to create a golem's core could only be executed by 5th Circle mages. His students, even though they were skilled, weren't strong enough and would need mana stones. Even then, the golems his students created would be much smaller and weaker than the one Clayton had just summoned. Hearing that, Logan's expression shifted hard. He explained that mana stones were a mineral as rare as calcium or mithril, making them a rare ore that couldn't be produced artificially, and since they were used for magical assistance, they were insanely expensive. That made Logan think mana stones really weren't worth it for this job. But then another thought hit him. Was he really thinking about cost-effectiveness when it came to war? After all, what if he could win by investing just a little money? He asked Clayton if his golem would also get stronger with mana stones. Clayton confirmed, explaining that its strength and speed would increase, and it would last much longer. However, since he was a 5th Circle mage, he would need the highest quality mana stone. Even so, for a 2nd Circle mage, a low-quality mana stone would be enough, would last about 24 hours, and would still be much stronger than an adult man. Hearing this, Logan thought a low-quality mana stone must cost about the same as a gold piece. Their cost-effectiveness didn't justify the expense for this project, but for a short war like the last one, they could produce way bigger results. Dwayne arrived at the construction site, and the moment he saw the giant golem punching into the mountain, he completely freaked out. Logan tried to calm him down, explaining that the golem was digging a tunnel as part of the plan, but fear took over, and he couldn't even hear him. Without listening to Logan, he panicked and ran off, shouting that he needed to warn the patriarch. Logan turned to Hamar, telling him to take the workers and start building the water channel. He said there was no need to leave anyone to work on the tunnel, since the golem could handle it alone. Hamar nodded and started giving orders to the workers. Meanwhile, Logan reflected on how he now had 3 construction projects running at the same time, feeling both excited and locked in. First, the tunnel for the dam. Second, the water channel. And third, the mine, for which he already had the drilling results. Because of that, he had sent workers there before anywhere else. The young man thought that ever since returning from the capital, he'd been so busy with the dam that he hadn't been able to keep an eye on the mine. For that reason, he decided he was going to visit it tomorrow. The next day, Logan saw people constantly going in and out of the mine, with Hamar stuck in the middle of everything, looking especially irritated. Logan walked up to him and casually commented that they hadn't seen each other in a while. Hamar snapped back, asking what the hell he was talking about, accusing him of making him run from one end to the other non-stop. In a burst of rage, he yelled that he couldn't keep up this pace anymore, and said it would be better if Logan just killed him already. He complained that he couldn't even take a proper break, and demanded to know why he had to shoulder all this burden alone. Throughout the entire outburst, Logan stayed completely silent. Meanwhile, one of the other workers noticed how frustrated Hamar was, and told the others they needed to step in. Logan gently put a hand on his shoulder, trying to comfort him. He acknowledged how hard Hamar had been working, and told him that from now on, he would let him manage and administer everything by himself. Hamar's expression shifted to pure disbelief, as he asked if Logan was serious, wondering if he really planned to dump all the tasks on him. Logan felt a small sting of sadness when he realized Hamar had seen right through his intention. With a half-playful gesture, Logan stuck out his pinky finger, and promised that, as soon as all the construction was finished, Hamar could rest as much as he wanted. Overwhelmed, Hamar tried to push the young man's hand away, but Logan held onto his finger firmly, almost making the poor dwarf cry out in pain as he threatened to break it. Hamar, still sitting on the ground and annoyed, watched Logan turn his back and casually comb his hair, saying he was just trying to be funny. Then Logan looked toward the mine, thinking it would be exploited much faster than last time. Even though he wasn't completely sure about the dam yet, he hoped it would work out. It was the only way his plans could succeed. Logan then activated a communication channel to speak with Philip. His buddy told him that the construction materials would be delivered without any issues, and also mentioned that he had closed a deal for the wood, which would bring in an extra 100,000 gold per month. That news instantly lit up Logan's face. Philip didn't hide his excitement either, and told Logan that once they finished building the mine and clearing the land, the territory would be totally transformed, and that he'd love to see it in person one day. Logan stared at the orb for a moment, thoughtful, before replying that Philip should visit next year. Curious, Philip asked why, then quickly added that he probably wouldn't get an answer anyway. So he switched topics and revealed that rumors were spreading in the capital about a problem with the royal family. Philip asked what that problem could be, and Logan replied that he had heard about it at the Sword Duke's house, but didn't know the details, only that it seemed serious. He advised Philip to try to dig up more information. Inside his head, Logan drifted into memories from his past life, remembering that the following winter, the king would suddenly die, which would trigger a civil war. Still, he knew the information he had might not be perfectly accurate. If the king's death really was sudden, things would follow the same pattern as before. Otherwise, the timing could shift. Logan understood he couldn't start preparing seriously until he confirmed what was really happening. His main priority was getting the Mlan family ready. So Logan instructed Philip to allocate the remaining budget into an emergency fund, and to buy as many weapons and armor as possible, specifically enough to equip 500 men. Hearing that, Philip started sweating, saying this wasn't going to be easy at all. He questioned why Logan needed so much equipment when the Mclanes only had around 100 knights. Logan explained that the gear wasn't for the knights, but for the soldiers. That answer made Philip furious. He asked if Logan had completely lost his mind, arguing that no one fully armed their soldiers, because it was a total waste of money. But Logan refused to listen to the complaints. In his thoughts, he reasoned that even if his actions looked strange, they were driven by necessity. The last war had caused a lot of deaths, which hurt production badly. To avoid that happening again, he needed to minimize enlistment as much as possible, while at the same time boosting the strength of both his knights and his soldiers. Arming the soldiers was a key part of that strategy. Logan then asked Philip if his judgment had ever failed before. Reluctantly, Philip admitted that it hadn't. Logan smirked, and told him that in that case, they should move forward exactly as planned. Philip said he understood, and that he'd discreetly try to find out more about the rumors. With that, Logan said the next step was securing funds through the mine, stabilizing the food supply with the dam, and upgrading the soldiers' weaponry. The basic preparations for a massive leap forward were coming together smoothly. Sometime later, a massive pile of papers sat on Logan's desk, completely overwhelming him. Dwayne stood beside him, pointing at specific documents and directing his attention, telling him to read this one, sign the other, and keep going like that, before adding that he'd bring the next batch soon. While Logan was reading one of the papers, Dwayne pointed out that he had once again signed a document without properly checking it, questioning whether he planned to keep being this careless. It was clear that Logan really needed to get a grip on handling the territory's affairs. Right then, the door burst open. Kaisalan rushed in, looking sick with worry, and said that Hamar was trapped in a mine that had just collapsed. The news sent a chill straight down Logan's spine. He jumped out of his chair and demanded to know what had happened. Kaisalan explained that one of the tunnels had given way, and that more than 50 meters of it had caved in. There was no way to tell where Hamar was. Worried, Logan immediately asked if they had found Hamar yet. Dwayne cut in, asking since when their territory even had a mine. But Logan completely ignored him. Hearing that the collapse spanned over 50 meters, the young man bolted out of the room, shouting that they couldn't waste any time and had to head straight to the mine. Dwayne was left behind, totally clueless, yelling about where this whole mine story even came from. Logan arrived at the mine on horseback and immediately asked the workers which tunnel had collapsed. One of them pointed to the middle tunnel, explaining it was the deepest and darkest one. But Logan didn't listen for a second and rushed straight in. Inside, he used his aura to see in the darkness, and what he saw seriously disturbed him. Huge boulders were blocking the passage, and a few people were desperately trying to move them. The ancient form that oversaw the mine noticed Logan's presence. Logan ordered the workers to step back. He touched one of the stones and filled it with mana. He could feel the presence of 10 trapped people, one of them carrying the same energy as Hamar. He told the foreman that they had escaped the worst of it, but there were still many victims. The foreman, completely confused, asked how he could possibly know that. Logan ignored the question and asked how long it would take to clear the rocks. The foreman estimated at least 3 days, and that instantly made Logan anxious. He knew the longer they took, the slimmer the chances of survival for the people trapped inside. Outside, Logan asked Clayton and his apprentices for help. He begged them to rescue Hamar and the trapped workers, promising they'd be rewarded handsomely. Clayton realized Logan was talking about the place where Hamar had been working. He decided to help, but made it clear it wasn't for the money. It was because people were hurt. Logan thanked him and promised to return the favor. Clayton thought it was strange that Logan, who had always been so secretive about the mine, was suddenly giving up its location just to save a slave and a few workers. He used his magic to support the tunnel, and his disciples used mana stones to summon golems. Holding their crystals, the disciples threw the stones at the rubble, and the rocks transformed into stone golems that immediately started clearing the debris. The miners were terrified. They weren't used to seeing magic that powerful. Logan was stunned by their efficiency, watching them clear several meters of rubble in just seconds. Clayton urged them to move faster, and Logan didn't just stand there watching. He joined the workers and mages, carrying rocks and helping with the removal himself. Clayton was shocked to see Logan, a noble, working so hard to save commoners and a dwarf. For him, it was a scene he had never witnessed before. Then, the master of the mine shouted that he'd found Hamar, injured and partially buried. Seeing that, Logan was terrified. But then he realized that despite the scare, the injuries were minor, and everyone was okay. A huge wave of relief washed over him, and he thanked the gods that everyone had escaped with only a few scratches. Later, in the infirmary, Logan asked Hamar what had happened. Hamar admitted he had dozed off because he'd been overworking himself lately. Logan was upset, but Hamar tried to reassure him, saying he'd be back to work in no time. Logan cut him off and told him to rest for as long as he needed. Hamar was shocked by Logan's concern and shouted that he was going to rest even if the world caught fire or aliens showed up. Leaving the infirmary, Logan was impressed that the rescue had taken only 2 hours. His thoughts were interrupted by Clayton, who suddenly appeared and said that Logan's mind was something wonderful. Logan wondered if the mage had figured out his mind was full of gold and whether he'd keep it a secret. He explained to Clayton that the mine was crucial to his plans and that he had no one else to replace Hamar. Besides, if he couldn't protect his people, he'd have no one left. Clayton was intrigued by his answer and asked if Logan wanted a magic tower in his territory. The young man was stunned. Clayton explained that it was time to get rid of the old tower master, and Logan's lands were perfect for a small magic tower. Logan was ecstatic and said it would be an honor. He asked if Clayton's apprentices would come and what the cost would be. Clayton replied that his disciples would definitely come and that he didn't need much money. He trusted Logan's character and abilities. Logan was completely amazed. Hamar, who had overheard the conversation, asked Clayton if he'd hit his head, but Logan just told his friend to get back to bed. A week later, Hamar reported to Logan, saying he was fully recovered and heading back to the mine to make up for lost time. Logan wished him good luck. As soon as Hamar left, Dwayne showed up looking absolutely terrifying. He demanded to know why Logan had kept the mine a secret and for how long he'd been developing it. Logan simply apologized and said he had forgotten. Frustrated, Dwayne asked how he could possibly forget something so important. Instead of answering properly, Logan broke into a huge grin and revealed the truth. It was a gold mine. Dwayne refused to believe it and told his young master to stop being a wise guy. There was no way people like them could have a gold mine, and he asked what Logan was even talking about. Logan asked what was so unbelievable about it, and called him a rascal. Then, getting serious again, he informed him that the mine was expected to generate about 100 million gold per year, and asked if he really thought he'd joke about something like that. Hearing this, Dwayne went completely speechless. He asked if Logan was serious, and just froze on the spot. Logan touched Dwayne, worried, and he nearly fell backward. It looked like the information was making him faint because he just couldn't process the amount of cash that mine would bring in. Elsewhere, a group of people were walking together through the forest, confused about why they'd been called back again. The dam construction was finished in just 3 months, instead of the 6 they expected. They were the administrators Dwayne had gathered for a final inspection. Logan greeted them warmly, saying how glad he was to have them there, and acknowledging how tight their schedules were. He asked them to stay and witness the opening of the dam. One of the administrators looked on skeptically, thinking it was a waste of time because bringing water from the Ludder River to sprinkle over the desert wouldn't make a lick of difference. He thought Logan should have invested the money more wisely, maybe by fixing the south wall. The other administrators also questioned why Logan had put in so much effort. They turned to Dwayne, who was once again standing there with his mouth wide open. Dwayne stared at the dam, realizing it wasn't built just to water some wasteland. It was actually connected directly to the underground channels of the Ludder River. If they could supply water continuously through those channels, the vast wasteland could truly become fertile land. Logan looked around and saw that everyone was gathered, the workers, the mages, and the administrators. He turned to Clayton and gave the signal. Clayton, without a second's hesitation, got ready to start the process. Hamar grumbled, complaining that they had worked their butts off so the workers themselves could open and close the floodgates. But Logan explained that the first time had to be something huge. He wanted to show everyone on the Mlan property what they had built with their own hands. An image of the dam appeared, showing some golems positioned in front of the floodgates, ready to lift them. The administrators were speechless at first, but they got used to it pretty quickly. Then Clayton shouted loud enough for everyone to hear, giving the order for the golems to open the gates. They stretched their hands toward the gates and began to lift. Logan smiled, satisfied. But something weird happened. The golems were struggling to lift the gates. With a killer smile, Clayton looked at Hamar, muttering and asking what the hell he was doing. But Hamar looked just as confused since he had already given orders for the workers to open the gates. Seeing the situation, Logan started to sweat and had a flashback of a conversation with Clayton where he'd warned him that lifting the gates would be too much for the golems. Apparently, the golem's strength was mostly for show, and it would take about 100 workers turning the pulleys to open the gates. Thinking fast, Logan told Clayton to order the golems to knock down the gates. Hamar and Clayton were flabbergasted, and Clayton asked if he was serious. Logan just told him to do as he said since they could rebuild the gates later. After hesitating for a few seconds, Clayton did what Logan asked, and the golems started punching the gates. The construction crew couldn't believe what they were seeing since their hard work had just been finished. Suddenly, the gate gave way, and the water came rushing down with insane force, dragging the golems with it. Everyone was confused, but Logan just grinned from ear to ear, totally thrilled. The townspeople, who had worked so hard on the construction, couldn't hold back their tears at the sight of the water, finally understanding what it truly meant. In that moment, Logan thought this would solve their food problem during the Civil War. They could start planting next spring. Even Dwayne was happy and jumped on Logan's back, scaring the daylights out of him, saying how wrong he was about the dam and begging for forgiveness. Logan told him it was all good and started teasing him, asking why a big guy like him was crying so much. But not everyone was happy. Hamar was over in the corner crying and asking how long it would take to rebuild the gates. Clayton came over and said he'd help rebuild them one more time. Logan then said they didn't need the gate urgently and that they could take a week off and finish the mine construction first. After that, he told Hamar that once this project was done too, they'd have a long vacation again. That lit up Hamar's eyes, and he asked if Logan was serious. Logan reassured him, but what Hamar didn't know was that they'd be busy again soon. Lots of farmers would want the fertile land, and they'd need to build a new village for people to live in. Logan turned to Hamar, about to praise him, but realized that wasn't the right way to do things. He called him over. Hamar turned, curious. Logan commented that construction must be tough, even for someone like him, since he'd never heard of dwarves being good at building. That drove Hamar crazy. He asked what Logan was trying to say, and explained that after making weapons, construction was the dwarves' specialty. Logan realized Hamar was right where he wanted him, and commented that it was great to hear that. Hamar replied that it sounded suspicious, that Logan could praise him all he wanted, but it wouldn't get him anything, and asked why he was suddenly so interested in construction. Logan played it off, saying it was just curiosity. But as soon as Hamar turned his back, Logan thought to himself that after his week of rest, the thrilling experience of home building would begin, and then he wouldn't be laughing. He was actually scared to run into him at night. As soon as the chat with Hammer was over, Logan stepped up and addressed the crowd at the inauguration. He repeated the promise he had made earlier. First, that everyone would be allowed to farm the McLean Plains. Second, that they would receive leasing rights proportional to their work, and that taxes would be capped at only 30%. Then he glanced at the vassals, thinking that by announcing it this way, not even they could oppose it. In fact, they all looked radiant, realizing that the territory might finally be changing for real. 4 weeks later, Logan was back in his office with Rick, reviewing a plan sent by Hamar, who had already finished the village layout and even a model house. Logan commented that he knew he'd chosen the right person for the job, and Rick agreed, saying Hamar was amazing. Logan thought about how he never imagined Hamar would accept the task when he first approached him a few weeks ago. Hamar had planned the streets in a cross pattern and placed houses of the same size, complete with wells, community bathrooms, and sewers. Logan thought he had basically tried to replicate the city plan he'd seen in his past life. Suddenly, a strong smell hit Logan in the face. He turned to Rick and asked why he stank so bad. Rick said it was all Logan's fault, and asked why that drug was selling so insanely well, saying that if it weren't for that, he wouldn't be suffering like this. Just then, Dwayne burst into the room screaming Logan's name. Logan asked if he was ever going to knock again, but Dwayne didn't care, and immediately started saying something about Hamar. Then his expression flipped into pure joy. He told Logan that Hamar had sent word they could start mining the gold now Hamar and showed him some nuggets, explaining they had found the treasure just like that. Logan told Hamar he did a great job, and Dwayne hugged him, asking how they got so lucky to have him around. But Hamar just wanted to rest, and his eyes showed he had been awake for a very, very long time. Logan then asked him how much they could start extracting. Hamar replied that everything was on schedule, and that they could pull out a ton of gold per month, which should last at least 10 years. He once again insisted that he really needed to go rest. Logan hesitated and argued that there was still so much to do, like building the city, handling more beasts, and creating new weapons. He asked Hamar if that would be possible. Logan's request hit like an axe blow, making Hamar sweat and grab his head. Then he just lay down flat on the floor to rest. Dwayne bent over him and called him the treasure of the territory. Logan thought he'd be the only one moving forward now since there was still so much work left to do. He told Hamar he'd keep his promise and that he could take his time off. Hamar suddenly started screaming with happiness and bolted out like a flash of lightning. Logan wondered if he'd awakened some kind of power because the dwarf was way too fast. Behind him, Dwayne started crying with joy. Logan asked what happened, and Dwayne explained that the mine would bring in about 100 million gold a year. Dwayne told Logan to hell with the Kairos, and that their territory was saved because they wouldn't have to worry about anything anymore. Logan teased him, saying he was crying more than when the dam was finished. Then the young man looked calmly at Dwayne and dropped a crucial fact. He told him that the only one he should fear was him, and warned him to stay sharp because that mine was also his. Dwayne was instantly terrified. Logan explained that of course he'd pay 30% in taxes to the family, but that was it. Dwayne got up, completely bewildered, and knelt before Logan, saying he trusted his judgment. Logan then warned Dwayne that they had to keep the mine a secret, because if word got out, the Bifrost, Kalia, and the Margrave would cause trouble. Dwayne said he'd take care of it, which made Logan feel a bit uneasy. He thought his father was going to be a real handful since he had made a lot of changes before Patrick's return. A week later, Logan and his father were walking by the river, admiring how beautiful the place had become. Logan noticed right away that his father had become an advanced knight. Patrick acknowledged that while Logan had been away, he had managed to accomplish a ridiculous amount. Logan tried to defend himself and explain his plans, but Patrick cut him off mid-sentence. Patrick said that having water flowing through that wasteland was insane in the best way possible, and that Logan was way better at managing the territory than he ever was. Logan tried to stay humble, but Patrick kept going, saying Logan had managed to do more in just 3 months than he himself had done in the last 10 years, and then straight up thanked him for it. Logan wanted to say he was grateful too, but Patrick interrupted him again and dropped another bomb. He announced that from now on, Logan would handle all the duties of a lord, because he wanted to focus entirely on training the Order of Knights. Hearing that, Logan was completely stunned. Patrick cut him off again before he could react and asked if he knew what he had realized during his training. Then he said it bluntly, "I got old." Patrick explained that he couldn't master the secret techniques anymore, and that now it was up to young people like Logan and Ronian to try. He said Logan had helped him break through a barrier that had blocked him for years, and that he now wanted to step back and become a guide instead of staying in the front. Logan nodded and accepted the proposal. Patrick then turned and called for Marion, asking her to help Logan fulfill his role. Marion agreed without hesitation. Patrick gave Logan a small nudge, clearly encouraging him to talk to his mother. The young man walked up to Marion, who was standing there in a beautiful dress, holding a parasol. She started by saying that Logan's achievements were more than enough to prove his ability to be the successor. She called him young master, and said that now she only wished for Ronian's success. Logan tried to apologize, but she interrupted him, saying she was the one who should be sorry. She admitted her vision had been limited and said she hoped Logan would be generous. Marion continued, saying that Logan had been teaching Ronian how to fight and that he had never been happier. She asked him to continue looking after his brother. Logan didn't like where this conversation was heading at all, and suddenly shouted that parents shouldn't use respectful titles with their children. He told her to call him Mom instead. That made her stop, completely emotional. She turned and said goodbye, then walked toward Patrick. Patrick signaled to Logan, clearly approving of what his son had just done. Logan stood there and watched his parents walk away.